Okay then, so this is the Torah portion where they crossed the Red Sea. Torah portion Beshalach. And when I came to it, I had a load of thoughts about, what I might talk about in the Torah portion. But it took a weird turn. I started looking into songs, because the Song of Moses is into it. And I started looking at the words used in the Hebrew and in the Greek about songs, and then started following a trail through the scriptures. And the last thing that I would have ever expected that I'd end up talking about is singing to Yehovah. That's just not something that I thought I'd ever be teaching on. But it started there, and then it all kind of unfolded from there. And in the end, I had the Torah portion, and I felt like I'd not really put it together. I felt like it was something that Yehovah kind of put blocks down. So when that sort of thing happens, I always think, this will probably be useful for somebody in particular. But what I'm going to talk about, just kind of as an overarching theme, is exalting Yehovah and what it is to exalt him. We can kind of understand that following the Torah is a way that we could exalt Yehovah and various other little things, but the actual idea of how he's exalted in the scriptures and how we should exalt him and how we should speak of him, and the tendency that we have when we speak of him to kind of paint him in a particular light that we think will be more palatable to others, and all sorts of different things all started to crystallize and come together. Well, we'll start in Exodus 13, verse 17. It says, "It came to be when Pharaoh had let the people go that Elohim did not lead them by the way of the land of the Philistines, though that was nearer. For Elohim said, lest the people regret when they see fighting and return to Mitzrayim." Okay, so when I went through it last year, I liken this to the people that Yeshua speaks of in the parable of the sower. When he speaks to the people who are sown on rocky ground, he says they are those who, when they hear the word, immediately receive it with joy, and they have no root in themselves but are short-lived. Then when pressure or persecution arises because of the word, immediately they stumble. Okay, but Yehovah knows that these people are like this. And I said last year that the reason that he's doing all of this is for Joshua and for Caleb. Okay, he's taking all of these people out so that those people end up in the promised land. But there's another consideration in this as well, because he knows this is how they're going to react. They've just come out of Egypt, and he knows that if they were to be tested like this, they would fail. So the other part of this to consider is no trial has overtaken you except such as is common to man, and Elohim is trustworthy, who shall not allow you to be tried beyond what you are able. So he knows that these people are not able to pass this particular test at this particular point. And we know what's going to happen from here. We know that these people are no good anyway, and they're not going to pass any of the tests. But this is a consideration in this as well. Verse 18 says, "So Elohim led the people around by the way of the wilderness of the Sea of Reeds, and the children of Yisrael went up armed from the land of Mitzrayim. And Moshe took the bones of Yosef with him, for he certainly made the children of Israel swear, saying, Elohim shall certainly visit you, and you shall bring my bones from here with you." And I think we've kind of got a bit of an inaccurate view of what it was like for them to be in slavery in Egypt. When they left, they went out armed. I don't think that they were quite as heavily oppressed as we think that they were. Their lives were probably a little bit freer than we have the conception in our minds. Verse 21 says, "And Yehovah went before them by day in a column of cloud to lead the way, and by night in a column of fire to give them light, so as to go by day and by night. The column of cloud did not cease by day, nor the column of fire by night before the people." So you can obviously see in this is how Yehovah leads us in our lives. And again, I think that when I've spoken of the idea that you shouldn't pray to Yehovah to ask him what to do, you should pray to him to ask you to lead you. I think that it's something that people have difficulty reckoning with. Not necessarily anyone that's here, but I've had conversations, and it seems that people, I don't know, they still look to things in their life like, why did this one event happen? Why is this happening? And like I've said before, things don't happen. Everything doesn't happen for a reason. Some things are just the events in our life. Yehovah hasn't created every event so that we can reverse engineer it and look at it and say, why did this one event happen? What did Yehovah create this one event in my life for? And this makes me think of it. Okay, but Yehovah does lead us. And we should pray to him to guide us, and we should pray to him to lead us. But the overarching thing that he's given us is his word, and his word equips us for all of those situations. So when those things happen, rather than saying, what is Yehovah doing in this one particular situation, we should say, how has he equipped us to deal with this situation through his word? Verse 1 of chapter 14 says, And Yehovah spoke to Moshe, saying, Speak to the children of Israel that they turn and camp before Pihahiroth, between Migdol and the sea, opposite Baal Zephon. Camp before it by the sea. For Pharaoh shall say of the children of Israel, They are entangled in the land, the wilderness has closed them in. And I shall strengthen the heart of Pharaoh, and he shall pursue them. But I am to be esteemed through Pharaoh and over all his army, and the Mitzrites shall know that I am Yehovah. So as we saw a couple of weeks ago, Pharaoh, when he sees that the situation changes, he starts to be emboldened, and Yehovah strengthens him in the heaviness of heart that he has, in the hard heart that he has. Yehovah says, I will strengthen the heart of Pharaoh, and he shall pursue them. He says, but I am to be, and it's the same word there for when Pharaoh's heart is made dull or unresponsive, heavy. The word is kavad. Now, these are some of the words that I want to look at as we go through this, because I want to look at what it is to exalt Yehovah. And one of the words that we see is this word kavad. And I'll cover it in a bit more detail in a couple of minutes. But it's basically to make something heavy. It's got this sense of making something weighty, something significant. So the idea of it being heavy, when Pharaoh's heart is kavad, it becomes heavy as in dull. But this is the sort of meaning that it carries. Okay, so one of the words that I want to look at today is room. Okay, see what this is on. Okay, room. Room is a verb, and essentially what it means is to lift something up, to raise something up, by implication for something to be exalted. We can understand that in English. We can say something has been lifted up, and we could understand that to mean that it's been exalted. But as I've said before, the best way to understand words often is to look at how they're used in the scriptures. Genesis 7:17 says, And the flood was on the earth 40 days, and the waters increased, lifted up the ark. Okay, so we can understand they didn't exalt the ark, they lifted the ark physically up in the air. But Avram said to the king of Sodom, I have lifted up my hand to Yehovah, I've roomed my hand to Yehovah. Came to be when he heard, this is Potiphar's wife relating this, that I lifted up my voice and cried out. Okay, so you can lift up your voice when you're crying out. We'll also see the idea of lifting up your voice, which is a different word, nasa. This is the word when we lift up our heads, or we have our heads lifted up. It's more, carries the connotation of being accepted. Here though, I lifted up my voice, I roomed my voice, I exalted my voice almost. Numbers 15 verse 19, Then it shall be, when you eat of the bread of the land, that you present a contribution to Yahovah. And we looked at this when we went through the book of Leviticus. Okay, we know what the heave offering is. We're familiar with the words wave offering or heave offering, but it actually comes from this word. It comes from room. So a wave offering, an offering that is lifted up, is a terumah. Okay, and it says when you present, in the English, that's the way that it's been approximated, but actually it's when you lift up, a lifting up offering, okay? Deuteronomy 8 verse 14 says that your heart then becomes lifted up. Okay, and you forget Yehovah your Elohim, your heart becomes exalted. And what we're going to see is that these things can be done to incorrect understandings. They can be done to the understanding that Yehovah teaches us of his word. They can be done to us, or they can be done to Yehovah. So your heart becomes room. Psalm 34 verse 3 says, O Yehovah, make great with me, magnify with me, make Gadol or Gadalah, and let us exalt his name together. Okay, so now we can see it in the context in which we'll appreciate it in this Torah portion. Let us lift up his name together. And this is what Yehovah is looking for in people. He wants people who lift up what is good. He doesn't want people who lift up what is false. Okay, the people that he wants his kingdom to comprise of are those who recognize what is tov, those who fear his word, they appreciate his word, they love his word, and they lift it up, they exalt what is good rather than what is false. Okay, so this is another word. Okay, it looks like kalal. It's not, it's salal. This first letter, reading right to left, is a samek. You get two S sounds in Hebrew. You get a sheen, you get a samek, and they both make what we would think of as an S sound. So this is to salal something, and this also means to lift up, to cast something up, to exalt, to esteem, to highly prize. Okay, so Exodus 9:17, we see that Pharaoh does this to himself. You still salal yourself against my people. Jeremiah 18:12-15 says, but they shall say, it is no use, for we walk according to our own plans, and we do each one the stubbornness of his evil heart. So what I was talking about a couple of weeks ago, and in this idea of we walk out what seems good to us, these people are walking out their own plans, but this is seen as a bad thing. The reason is because they do after the stubbornness of their evil hearts. When we make our own plans, we make them according to the word. So as long as we're doing it according to what the word says is good, we can make our own plans. These people are different. Therefore, thus said Yehovah, ask now among the nations, who has heard the like of this? The maiden of Yisrael has done what is most horrible. Does the snow of Lebanon cease from the rock of the field, or the cool flowing waters from afar dry up? But my people have forgotten me. They've burned incense to what is false. They've stumbled from their ways, from the ancient paths, to walk in bypaths and a way that is not lifted up, a way that is not exalted. They lift this way up, but it is not a good thing. Okay, so they want to lift up what is false. Psalm 68 verse 4 says, sing to Elohim, sing praises to his name, salal him who rides through the deserts by his name Yah, and exalt before him. Exalt's a word that's kind of like exalt, but they mean different things. To exult in something is to rejoice in it. This word salal could well be translated here, exalt him who rides through the deserts. Salal him though. And this is the word kavad that we saw before. And to kavad something is to be heavy, to be weighty, be grievous, be hard. Okay, it carries this idea though of making something weighty. Okay, we know what people do with Yehovah's word when they despise it. We know what that word means. It means they lightly esteem it. Okay, to kavod something, though, is to make it heavy, make it important, make it be of consequence. Okay, so we are to kavod Yehovah. But it carries this idea of esteem, to esteem something. The other word is kavod. Okay, so kavod is the verb. That's what you do. You make something heavy. You make something esteemed or weighty or of consequence. Kavod is the noun that comes from that. So the state is being heavy, or, as you can see here, glory or honor. To be esteemed, to be glorified. Okay, that's what it is to be kavod. Genesis 3 verse 2 says, and Avram was very rich in livestock, in silver and in gold. And again, this is just an English approximation of what the word's saying. Actually, what the Hebrew says carries much deeper meaning. Abraham was very weighty. He was very esteemed. He was very honored. Okay, this was his position with Yehovah. So he was, by interpretation, rich, but that's not what it's saying. Okay, it's saying he was weighty, he was of consequence. Exodus 8 verse 15 says, and when Pharaoh saw that there was relief, he hardened his heart. He made it heavy, he made it dull, he made it unresponsive. So that meaning of it being heavy or weighty. He also exalted his heart. Okay, he made it esteemed in his eyes. Okay, the evil is what he was lifting up, what he was esteeming. We saw that he salaled himself and he hardened his heart. Exodus 20 verse 12 says, respect or honor your father and your mother. And Charlie will be going through this next week. But this is this word again. It's to make them of consequence, to make them weighty in your life, to give them esteem, okay, to honor them. Not that you have to do everything that they tell you to do, but you make them of consequence, you make them important, and you make them weighty. Numbers 22, 16 to 17. They came to Balaam and said to him, this is what Balak son of Zippor said, do not be withheld from coming to me, please. So this is Balaam. For I esteem you very greatly, is what the English says. The English approximation, esteem you very greatly. But in the Hebrew it says kavod, kavod. And we know when words are used in multiples, it adds to the weight of the word. Okay, so it's not just I esteem you, I make you weighty. It's I make you incredibly weighty. Kavod, kavod. Psalm 22, 22 to 23 says, I make known your name to my brothers. In the midst of the assembly, I praise you. Okay, and this word's halal. Okay, we're going to look at praising and exalting him in the second part. This is from where we get hallelujah. Okay, to praise Yah is this word, halal Yah. And you who fear Yehovah, praise him. All you seed of Yaakov, esteem him, make him weighty. Okay, in your praises of him, make him weighty, recognize who he is, and fear him, all you seed of Israel. Psalm 29, 1 to 2 says, ascribe to Yehovah, O you sons of the mighty, ascribe to Yehovah esteem and strength. So this is the noun version of it. Not making him weighty, ascribe to him this state of being weighty, being of consequence, this state of, as we often see it translated, glory. Ascribe to Yehovah glory and strength. I don't really like those words. I don't like the words grace and faith and glory and those sort of things, because they all seem a bit woolly, like Christianisms, where nobody really understands what the word's actually saying. Okay, esteem, it's okay. I think it's better than glory. He's being esteemed, though. Ascribe to him weight and esteem. Ascribe to Yehovah the esteem of his name. Bow yourselves to Yehovah in the beauty of holiness or set apartness. Psalm 50, 14 to 17 says, offer thanksgiving to Elohim. Pay your vows to the Most High. Call upon me in the day of distress. Let me rescue you, and you esteem me. Okay, you make me weighty. So you can see in all of these verses, these things are all to do with what it is to exalt Yehovah, to make him weighty, to lift him up above the world. Okay, to make him set apart from the world, to lift him up and make him weighty and of consequence. But to the wrong, Elohim says, what right have you to recite my laws or take my covenant in your mouth while you hated instruction and cast my words behind you? Okay, so the ones who are following his word, they esteem him, they make him of weight. To the others, he says, what right have you to recite them? Okay, you do not lift them up. You do not esteem them. You hate them. You despise them. You lightly esteem them. And you cast them behind you. So you've got no right to even be talking about these things because you do not give them the correct weight. You do not give them the correct consequence in your life. Proverbs 4, 1-8. Okay, we'll see all these words used together. It says, children, listen to the discipline of a father and give attention to no understanding. For I gave you good doctrine. Do not forsake my Torah. For I was my father's son, tender, and the only one in the eyes of my mother. Then he taught me and said to me, let your heart hold fast my words. Cherish my commands and live. Okay, so to cherish something, again, is to give weight and give importance to it. To recognize it for what it is. Acquire wisdom, acquire understanding. Do not forget and do not turn away from the words of my mouth. Do not leave her and let her guard you. Love her and let her watch over you. Okay, so wisdom is always anthropomorphized as a woman. It's given human characteristics. And here it's spoken of, as she is throughout Scripture, as a her. Okay, do not leave her. Let her guard you. Love her and let her watch over you. Lift her up, esteem her, and it will do you good. The beginning of wisdom is acquire wisdom, and with all you're acquiring, acquire understanding. Exalt her, lift her up, and let her room you. Let her lift you up. She brings you esteem. She makes you weighty and of consequence when you embrace her. Okay, so we do this to Yehovah. We esteem him. And in turn, it has this effect on us also. This is what Paul's talking about in 2 Thessalonians when he says, to this end, we always pray for you that our Elohim will count you worthy of this calling and complete all the good pleasure of goodness and the work of belief with power, so that the name of our Master Yeshua Messiah is esteemed in you, so that it is given weight and consequence in you, and you in him. Okay, so if you're in him, you're doing all of these things. So we give him esteem, okay, so that men will see your good works and they'll esteem your Father who is in heaven. We also will have this weightiness added to us. Okay, it has good effects in our lives. We are esteemed and we are lifted up by lifting up and exalting Yehovah. Verse 5 says, it was reported to the king of Mitzrayim that the people had fled, and the heart of Pharaoh and his servants was turned against the people. And they said, why have we done this, that we have let Yisrael go from serving us? Okay, so it took the death of the firstborn for them to even get to the point where they were like, okay, yeah, just go. Because Yehovah kept strengthening Pharaoh and strengthening his people's heart in their wickedness. Okay, and I spoke a couple of weeks ago about what does this say about people who do what Yehovah says to do because they're scared of the consequences in their life. Not because they salal him, not because they room him, they lift him up, not because they've given him any kind of weight, but out of pure fear. Okay, and that's not the fear of Yehovah. That comes with lifting him up and exalting him and all of the other things. But they just do it out of fear. And I've had numerous people say to me, you know, yeah, I'm going to start doing that because this thing's going wrong in my life. Or, you know, I'm scared that if I don't do this, then something will go wrong. And it's this actually being scared of the consequences rather than because you've recognized what it is and you lift it up and you give it esteem. Pharaoh, he let them all go because I imagine he was getting scared. By the end of those plagues, he keeps coming to the point where he changes his mind, and then Yehovah strengthens him in his hardness. So what does it say about those people who do things out of fear, and they begin to do those things? What does it say to them if Yehovah was to strengthen them in their wickedness? Okay, we'd see people doing things like this. The reason that Yehovah is doing this, he's strengthening him in his hardness of heart, is for a reason for him to be exalted. And we're going to see that. He's risen him up so that he can show his power in him. So he made his chariot ready, and he took his people with him. He took 600 choice chariots and all the chariots of Mitzrayim with officers over all of them. And Yehovah hardened the heart of Pharaoh, king of Mitzrayim, and he pursued the children of Israel. But the children of Israel went out defiantly. And it's the same word, room. Hey, they went out with a high hand. They went out with their hands lifted up. They went out lifted up. Okay? See this word in Numbers 15 as well. For him who does whatever by mistake, there is one Torah, both for him who is native among the children of Israel and for the stranger who sojourns in their midst. But the soul who does whatever lifted up with a high hand, whether he is native or a stranger, he reviles Yehovah, and that soul shall be cut off from among his people, because he's despised the word of Yehovah and broken his command. Okay, so whoever does whatever with their hand lifted up, okay, he has despised the word of Yehovah. So what's he doing? He's lifting up himself. He is exalting himself. Okay, he's lightly esteemed the word of Yehovah to esteem something else, to esteem what is false. He's broken his command, so he's shown he gives no weight to Yehovah, and instead he gives weight to himself. Verse 9 says, and the Mitzrites pursued them, and all the horses and chariots of Pharaoh and his horsemen and his army overtook them, camping by the sea beside Pahach-Hirath before Baal-Zephon. I read this and I thought, that's not right. They didn't overtake them camped by the sea, did they? Okay, they never got to where they were camping and destroyed the camp or anything else. They never actually reached where they were. So I thought, that's weird. I looked it up in the Septuagint to see what that says. The Septuagint says that they found them camping by the sea. It's a completely different word. It can't be that they overtook them, because when the Masoretic text says overtook in other places, the Septuagint uses a word that means they were overtaken there. Lavan overtook Yaakov when he was pursuing him. Okay, Yosef, when he sends his steward, his servants out, arise and pursue after the man, and thou shalt overtake them. And it's a different word. And all the way through, where the Masoretic text uses the word that it uses here for they overtook them by the sea, anywhere else it uses that word, the Septuagint uses a word which means to overtake. But in that one instance, when it says that they overtook them where they were camped, it says they found them where they were camped. And that makes a lot more sense. So the Mitzrites pursued them, and all the horses and chariots of Pharaoh and his horsemen and his army, and overtook them, or found them rather, camping by the sea beside Pahach-Hirath before Baal-Zephon. And when Pharaoh drew near, the children of Israel lifted their eyes and saw the Mitzrites coming up after them. Okay, so when they were drawing near, they didn't ever overtake them, they found them. And they were greatly afraid, so the children of Israel cried out to Yehovah. And they said to Moshe, did you take us away to die in the wilderness, because there are no graves in Mitzrayim? So they're being sarcastic with him. Did we have to come here to die, Moses? This is great, isn't it? What is this that you've done to us to bring us up out of Mitzrayim? Is this not the word that we spoke to you in Mitzrayim, saying, leave us alone and let us serve the Mitzrites? For it would have been better for us to serve the Mitzrites than to die in the wilderness. Okay, so we're seeing another glimpse of how these people are. We know how they turn out. We know that they're always harking after Egypt. They want to go back there. But this is often the way that people will react when they come out into following the truth of the word. They get so far with what they want, and then they'll come across something that they don't want to do. And so they say it would be better for us to go back to Egypt. So again, these people are demonstrating these characteristics of the people who, when they hear the word, they immediately receive it with joy, but they have no root in themselves and they're short-lived, and it doesn't last. When persecution arises because of the word, immediately they stumble. They see the armies coming after them, the persecution, so to speak, coming after them, and they say, we should have gone back to Egypt. The people of faith were actually very different to this. It says, in belief all these died, not having received the promises, but seeing them from a distance, welcomed and embraced them, and confessed that they were aliens and strangers on the earth. Okay, they could see what they were heading for. They didn't look back to what they'd left. For those who speak this way make it clear that they seek a fatherland. And yet, if they'd indeed kept remembering that place from which they had come out, they would have had the chance to return. Okay, so just like these people, it would be better for us to go back to Egypt. But people of faith, they see what's coming. We're going to have struggles. We're going to come to things and we're going to be like, oh, I either don't want to do that or do want to do that, whatever form it takes. And you struggle with Elohim and you say, no, I'm going to do what the word says. If Yehovah says it, that's right. And we're looking for the promise. Okay, we're looking for the inheritance. That's what people of faith do. These people, they kept remembering the place that they come from. But now they long for a better place that is a heavenly. Therefore, Elohim is not ashamed to be called their Elohim. And we see with these people that Elohim indeed does seem to be ashamed to be called their Elohim. And he keeps saying things to Moses like, get out the way, I'm going to destroy all of these people. And Moshe said to the people, do not be afraid. Stand still and see the deliverance or the salvation of Yehovah, which he has done for you today. For the Mitzrites whom you see today, you are never, never to see again. Yehovah does fight for you, and you keep still. And this is a theme that we see throughout Scripture of how Yehovah is exalted. The sort of things that we're to speak of Yehovah are things like this, and him defeating the enemy. We'll go on to see that. Yehovah said to Moshe, why do you cry to me? Speak to the children of Israel and let them go forward. And you lift up your rod. Stretch out your hand over the sea and divide it. And the children of Israel go on dry ground through the midst of the sea. And I am hardening the hearts of the Mitzrites, strengthening them. And they shall follow them. And I am to be esteemed through Pharaoh and over all his army, his chariots and his horsemen. So I am to be made weighty. This is what's happening here. I'm going to be lifted up. I'm going to be exalted, and I'm going to be made of consequence. I'm going to show my power in this person. The Mitzrites shall know that I am Yehovah when I am esteemed, when I'm glorified, when I'm made weighty and of consequence through Pharaoh, his chariots, and his horsemen. And this idea that the Mitzrites shall know that I am Yehovah, this is something that we see throughout the Scriptures, that the peoples, the nations are going to know that he is Yehovah when he is esteemed, when he's made heavy in their eyes. The angel of Yehovah who went before the camp of Israel moved and went behind them, and the column of cloud went from before them and stood behind them. So they were never overtaken by these people. Okay, they're still pursuing them. The camp came between the camp of the Mitzrites and the camp of Israel, and it was the cloud and the darkness, and it gave light by night, and the one did not come near the other all the night. So we know that this is the reason that Pharaoh was raised up, in order for Yehovah to show his power in him. We know that this is in fact why he raises up all people who are of a hard heart. And it's funny because Yehovah is going to be esteemed by everyone. Either like Pharaoh. He's going to be made weighty and of consequence when his power is shown in those people. His patience is seen, that he patiently bore with the vessels of wrath that were created for destruction. Okay? And ultimately, he will show his power in those people, and he will be esteemed through them. But the amazing thing is that he gives us the opportunity to give him esteem by walking out his ways. And then we're esteemed in those things also. So 2 Kings 19:32-35 shows us another example with another ruler. It says, "Therefore thus said Yehovah concerning the king of Ashur, he does not come into this city, nor does he shoot an arrow there, nor does he come before it with shield, nor does he build a siege mound against it. By the way that he came, by the same he turns back, and he does not come into this city, declares Yehovah, and I shall defend this city to save it for my own sake and for the sake of David my servant. And it came to be in that night that the angel of Yehovah went out and smote in the camp of Ashur 185,000, and they rose up early in the morning and saw all of them dead bodies." So we see the same thing here with the angel of Yehovah protecting Yehovah's people, and Yehovah being esteemed in the eyes of the particular nation. Isaiah 41:8-13 says, "But you, Yisrael, are my friend, are my servant Yaakov, whom I have chosen, the descendants of Abraham, my friend, whom I have taken from the ends of the earth and called from its farthest parts, and said to you, you are my servant. I have chosen you and have not rejected you. Do not fear, for I am with you. Do not look around, for I am your Elohim. I shall strengthen you. I shall also help you. I shall also uphold you with the right hand of my righteousness. See, all those who raged against you are ashamed and blush. They are as non-existent, and the men who strive with you perish." These people are going to be destroyed, but Yehovah is going to be esteemed through seeing his patience with the vessels of wrath prepared for destruction. "You seek them, but you do not find them, those who struggle with you. Those who fight you are as non-existent as naught. For I, Yehovah your Elohim, am holding your right hand, saying to you, do not fear, I shall help you." So this event's going to be very similar. Okay, when he gathered his people together out of Egypt, the future is going to be a time when he gathers us together, and our enemies are going to be shown to be nothing, and his power is going to be seen through them. Ezekiel 38:18-23 says, "And it shall be on that day, on the day when Gog comes against the land of Israel, declares the Master Yehovah, that my wrath shall come up in my face." Okay, English approximation. His anger is like his nose being hot. Okay, his wrath is like him having a hot nose. So what this is kind of saying is that his hot nose will come up in his face. "For in my jealousy and in the fire of my wrath I have spoken. On that day there shall be a great shaking in the land of Israel, so that the fish of the sea and the birds of the heavens and the beasts of the field and all creeping creatures that creep on the earth and all men who are on the face of the earth shall shake at my presence, and the mountains shall be thrown down, and the steep places shall fall, and every wall fall to the ground." See, when Yehovah speaks of himself, he speaks and he's entirely unashamed. He speaks of his great works on the earth. He speaks and he says, through these things I am esteemed. Through these things I am exalted. And as we're going to see when we get into the third part, these are the ways that we need to speak of him as well, and that we need to be unashamed when we speak of him. And that in fact, speaking of him in those ways holds great power. "And I shall call for a sword against Gog on all my mountains, declares the Master Yehovah, the sword of each one soul against his brother. And I shall judge him with pestilence and blood, and rain down flooding rain and hailstones, fire and sulfur on him and on his bands and on the many peoples who are with him. And I shall magnify myself, I shall make myself great, set myself apart, and I shall be known in the eyes of many nations, and they shall know that I am Yehovah." So this is the way that he's known to these people. Okay, they're stubborn and they're not going to listen to him, and they're hard-hearted. but his esteem, his weight is shown in these people. Isaiah 52:13-15, speaking of Yeshua, says, "See, my servant shall work wisely. He is high and has been lifted up, and he has been very high. As many were astonished at you, so marred from man his appearance, and his form from the sons of men. He does likewise sprinkle many nations," talking of the cleansing of the conscience, cleansing of the spirit. "Concerning him, kings shut their mouths, for that which had not been recounted to them they have seen, and what they had not heard they understood." Okay, so when they see him, they will understand him. Many people, in fact, have heard of Yeshua, and they've heard kind of a wishy-washy version of him, and they don't understand who he actually is. But one day these people will understand who he is. They'll see what they have not previously understood. Moshe stretched out his hand over the sea, and Yahovah caused the sea to go back by a strong east wind all that night, and made the sea into dry land, and the waters were divided. And the children of Israel went into the midst of the sea on dry ground, and the waters were a wall to them on their right and on their left. And this phrasing that he made the sea into dry land, we can kind of understand, he split the sea and they walked through on the dry land. Kind of see, he made the sea into dry land. Okay, but last year I went through something, I think for me it's one of the most amazing prophecies in all of the scriptures. It's a prophecy about when we enter into Mount Zion, okay, when the dead in Messiah are raised in Sheol. So I would recommend people to go and watch this, because I'm not going to go through it all again, but these passages are heavy with these allusions to us entering into Mount Zion in the end. The Mitzrites pursued and went after them into the midst of the sea, all the horses of Pharaoh, his chariots, and his horsemen. And it came to be in the morning watch that Yahovah looked down on the army of the Mitzrites through the column of fire and cloud, and he brought the army of the Mitzrites into confusion. He took off their chariot wheels so that they drove them with difficulty. And the Mitzrites said, "Let us flee from the face of Israel, for Yahovah fights for them against the Mitzrites." Okay, and this is final thing that I'm going to look at. This is how Yahovah is exalted, and this is one of the ways that we should speak of Yahovah and how we should relate him to other people. Okay, here he throws the Mitzrites into confusion, the Egyptians into confusion. Yahovah fights for them, and he causes disarray. And we see that this is what he does. When he wants to protect his people, when there's something coming against his people, he does this exact same sort of thing. Judges 7:22 says, 300 blew the shofarot, okay, the shofars. Yahovah set the sword of each one against the other all throughout the camp. Isaiah 19, I shall stir up Egyptians against Egyptians, and they shall fight, each one against his brother, each one against his neighbor, city against city, kingdom against kingdom. 1 Samuel 14, Shaul was called, and all the people who were with him, and they went to the battle, and see, every man's sword was against his neighbor, a very great confusion. Exactly the same as we see here with the Egyptians. Then the children of Ammon and Moab stood up against the inhabitants of Mount Seir. So the Ammonites and the Moabites stand up against Edom to destroy and annihilate them. Okay, so two of Israel's enemies. When they've made an end of the inhabitants of Seir, so when they destroyed the Edomites, they helped to destroy one another. Haggai 2 verse 22 says, and I shall overturn the throne of the kingdoms, and I shall destroy the might of the kingdom of the nations, and overturn the chariots and the riders, and the horses and their riders shall come down, each by the sword of his brother. So there's some kind of great army that comes against us in the future, comes against people in the future. When it comes to the time of the end, I have no doubt that Yahovah is going to do exactly the same again. It's like when they went into the land and they were faced with the giants, okay, and they all freaked out, and Yahovah said that it was a lack of faith, and he made them wander in the wilderness 40 years. Okay, this is what he told them. He says, I shall send my fear before you and cause confusion. Exactly the same as happened with the Egyptians. Among all the people to whom you come, and make all your enemies turn their backs to you. And I shall send hornets before you, which shall drive out the Hivite and the Canaanite and the Hittite from before you. Okay, so he had made this promise to them. He said, this is what I'm going to do. All these people that you go and you see the giants, and you're afraid of them. Okay, he's already made the promise that he will help you to overcome them. And the same is true for us. And sometimes we don't see things quite that clearly in our lives. We come against something and we think, I don't know how I'm going to overcome this. And we've got the choice: are we going to be like Jacob, who receives the name Israel because he struggled without Elohim and he overcame through the promises of Elohim? Or are we going to be like Esau? Psalm 76, I want to finish on this. I've got several psalms that are throughout this Torah portion. Psalms which exalt Yehovah, because as we go through, I hope that you'll get a clearer picture of what it is to exalt him and how we are to speak of him, the sort of things that we are to tell other people about who he is. It says, in Yehudah Elohim is known. His name is great in Israel. His tabernacle is in Shalem, and his dwelling place in Sion. There he broke the arrows of the bow, the shield and the sword and the battle axe, Selah. You are resplendent, more excellent than mountains of prey. The stout-hearted have been stripped. They slept their sleep, and none of the mighty men have found their hands. At your rebuke, O Elohim of Yaakov, both the rider and the horse lay stunned. You are to be feared, and who would stand in your presence when you are displeased? From heaven you shall cause judgment to be heard. The earth shall fear and shall be still. When Elohim arises to justice, to save all the meek of the earth, Selah. For the wrath of mankind praises you, and with the remainder of wrath you guard yourself. So just like he's saying, I'm going to be exalted when you see that I have patience with the vessels of wrath prepared for destruction, and all of those things exalt me. This is what's being spoken of here. The wrath of mankind praises him, brings esteem to him, lifts him up. Make vows to Yehovah your Elohim and pay them. Let all who are around him bring presents to the one to be feared. He cuts off the spirit of leaders. He is awesome to the kings of the earth. Okay, and as we go through, you're going to see more of these sorts of things that are spoken of him. And often in these things, it seems a little bit weird at first. Okay, the things that are spoken of, things like make vows to Yehovah your Elohim, pay them, let all who are around him bring presents to the one to be feared. And part of speaking of Yehovah and part of exalting him is to speak of these things that maybe the people around us would think of as a little bit weird. What, bring presents to Yehovah? That sounds a bit weird, or whatever else. And you'll see these things come up time and again as we go through this. When we come back in the second part, we'll look at singing songs to him, to exalt him, and we'll get a clearer idea of what this is. So it says, and Yehovah said to Moshe, stretch out your hand over the sea, let the waters come back on the Mitzrites, on their chariots, and on their horsemen. So as we saw in the first part, these works that Yehovah does, his destruction of the peoples for the sake of Israel, is something that he is to be exalted for. And Moshe stretched out his hand over the sea, and the sea returned to its usual flow at the break of day, with the Mitzrites fleeing into it. Thus Yehovah overthrew the Mitzrites in the midst of the sea. And the waters returned and covered the chariots and the horsemen and all the army of Pharaoh that came into the sea after them, and not even one of them was left. Notice the way that these things are spoken of in the scriptures. When we speak about these things and when we speak to people, sometimes we can kind of water Yehovah down a little bit, and we try to appeal to what we think people's sensibilities are. Okay, Yehovah is just like, I killed them all. They were all dead. We, like maybe if we're trying to describe to somebody why he killed all the people in the sea, maybe we kind of like make it a bit more airy-fairy and a bit more palatable by our reckoning to people. But Yehovah sees things differently, and he wants us to speak truth to people. Verse 29 says, the children of Israel walked on the dry ground in the midst of the sea, and the waters were a wall to them on their right and on their left. Thus Yehovah saved Israel that day out of the hand of the Mitzrites. And Israel saw the Mitzrites dead on the seashore. And Israel saw the great work which Yehovah had done in Mitzrayim. And the people feared Yehovah and believed Yehovah and his servant Moshe. And there's something to this. Okay, seeing these works and hearing of Yehovah's works, particularly the crucifixion, as we'll see in the third part, these things, speaking about them, carries power, and it's something that speaks to people on a spiritual level, and they understand these things and fear and believe. Now, that's not going to be the same for everyone. Most people, in fact, are going to think these things to be foolishness when we speak them to them. But the ones that we're trying to reach are going to fear, and they're going to believe because we speak of these things as truth. We try to kind of engineer a way of speaking about Yehovah and a way for them to understand him, which makes Yehovah more palatable. But actually what we're doing is we're giving a false version of who he is. But I'll get into that much more in the third part. Okay, so Exodus 15 starts and says, Then Moshe and the children of Israel sang this song to Yehovah and spoke, saying, I sing to Yehovah, for he is highly exalted. The horse and its rider he is thrown into the sea. So 3 words here, sang, sing, and song. Okay, and they're all the same word in Hebrew. They're all the word shir. Okay, so to sing, sang, that's obviously the verb. A song is a noun, it's the name for something. Think of it as portraying a singing. Think of a song as a singing. Okay, so we've sang this singing to Yehovah and spoke saying, I sing to Yehovah, for he is highly exalted. And what that is in the Hebrew is kind of like greatly magnified. It's not any of the words we look for lifting up. It's kind of to be made great, related to the word gadol, from where we get the Kohen Gadol, the high priest. It's the word that means great. He's highly exalted. The horse and its rider, he's thrown into the sea. And what we're going to see is when Yehovah does these works, his people exalt him. And they have this, what we're going to see in the Hebrew words, this kind of overwhelming feeling of joy within them, which they express through song to Yehovah. So the word shir, okay, here it is. It's the verb. It means to sing. Can also mean song, as we saw. And the Greek word for song is ode. Okay, we think of odes, they're kind of like poems. The Greek word is ode, a song, lay, or an ode. So in the Septuagint, it says, Then sang Moses and the children of Israel this ode to God, this song to God. And if we look for this word, if we look for the Strong's number of this word in the New Testament, you see it used in Revelation. It says, And when he took the scroll, the 4 beasts and the 24 elders fell down before the Lamb, each holding a harp. Okay, so harps and lyres are going to be things that we're going to see. And we're going to see the significance of them as we begin to look at songs. And golden bowls filled with incense, which are the prayers of the set-apart ones. And they sang a new song, a new ode, saying, You are worthy to take the scroll and to open its seals, because you were slain and have redeemed us to Elohim by your blood out of every tribe and tongue and people and nation, and made us kings and priests to our Elohim, and we shall reign upon the earth. Okay, so they burst into song. They have this overwhelming feeling inside of them, and they begin to exalt Yehovah for what he's done. And this is what we see with the people in Exodus 15 as well. Imagine what it would be to be pursued by the Egyptian army, and to be there with the sea in front of you and nowhere to go and this huge army coming after you. And you've lived in Egypt and you've seen the cruelty of the Egyptians, and all you can see is impending death coming towards you, and suddenly the waters open up and you go through and Yehovah defeats your enemies. Okay, we will have an event like this in the future, but they burst into song and they begin to exalt him. And that's what we see here. Revelation 14, 2-3, it says, I heard a voice out of the heaven like the voice of many waters, and like the voice of loud thunder. I heard the sound of harpists playing their harps. And they sang a new song before the throne, before the 4 living creatures, the elders, and no one was able to learn that song except the 144,000 who were redeemed from the earth. So these are the 144,000 who are protected during these times. And again, they've got this overwhelming swelling of emotion within them, and they express it here in song to him. Revelation 15, 2-3. And I saw a sea of glass mixed with fire, and those overcoming the beast and his image and his mark and the number of his name, standing on the sea of glass, holding the harps of Elohim. And they sang the song of Moshe, the servant of Elohim, and the song of the Lamb, saying, Great and marvelous are your works, Yehovah El Shaddai, righteous and true are your ways, O King of the set-apart ones. So they're exalting him. They're lifting him up. They're lifting his ways up, and they are giving him esteem. They're giving him weight. They're giving him consequence. Colossians 3 verse 16 says, Let the word of Messiah dwell in you richly, teaching and admonishing one another in all wisdom, singing with pleasure in your hearts to the Master in psalms, songs of praise, and spiritual songs. Okay, pneumaticus odes, word spiritual and then the word for song. Well, we've got these other songs that I mentioned here. We've got psalms, and in Greek that word is psalmos. What is rendered here is songs of praise, which, as it turns out, and you'll see, is a very good translation of hymnos. Okay, what we would think of as a hymn. Okay, a song of praise, because that's what it is. And these songs are actually different when they're identified. We can say, I know what a psalm is and I know what a hymn is, and they're going to be different. They're going to be qualitatively different, of different substance. Okay, so in the scriptures, in Hebrew, the book of Psalms is called the book of Tehillim. Okay? And that's a plural of the word Tehillah, and we'll look at that word. But Tehillim is not actually the word for Psalms. Funny as that seems, it's not the Hebrew word for Psalms. It's what the book of Psalms is called in Hebrew, but it's not the Hebrew word for Psalms. Okay, so the word in Greek is psalmos. And you'll notice here, it says a striking, a twanging, okay, of striking the chords of a musical instrument. Okay, and that's what this word is to do with. If you see it where it's used in context, we can see that this is what the book of Psalms should be about. In Acts 1 verse 20, so in the New Testament, it says, For it has been written in the book of Psalms, in the book of Psalmos. Okay, so this word is used, and it's to do with, and you'll see this more, to do with this twanging or a striking of an instrument, the idea being to make something reverberate. So in Greek, and how it's referred to in the New Testament, they're called psalms, but as we've seen in Hebrew, they're called tehillim, and as we're going to see, that's not the Hebrew word for psalms, that's the Hebrew word, as it turns out, for hymns. Okay, for songs of praise. Tehillim is the plural of tehillah, which is to praise. Okay, so it's praises, songs of praise. That's what the Hebrew means. Psalms are different though, and we're going to see. Acts 13 verse 33 says, it has also been written in the second psalm. So we know that individually they're called psalms as well. It's interesting to see that this is how the scriptures were divided up even back in the book of Acts as well, in the second psalm. It comes from this verb, okay, and the verb is salo, What it means is to pluck off or to pull out, to cause to vibrate by touching, to twang, to touch or strike the chord, to twang the strings of a musical instrument so that they gently vibrate, to play on the stringed instrument, to play the harp, etc. So there's this verb which is to pluck or to twang, to cause to reverberate. And psalmos is something, it's the noun version of that verb. So it's the name for a song in which that is done, essentially. Psalm 27 verse 6 in the Septuagint says, "And now behold, he has lifted up mine head over mine enemies. I went round and offered in his tabernacle the sacrifice of joy. I will even sing psalms," is how it's rendered here in the English. But that's not what it says. It says, "I will even salo." Okay, and that is to strike the strings of an instrument or cause an instrument to reverberate to Yehovah. Okay, in Hebrew the word for salo is zamar. Okay, the outline of biblical usage just tells us how it's used in the King James Bible, how it's translated. It doesn't necessarily give you its definition. It's saying to sing, sing praise, make music. But if we look at the Strong's definition, it says a primitive root through the idea of striking, sorry I'm doing this badly, striking with the fingers properly to touch the strings. I'll just read it. To touch the strings or parts of a musical instrument, play upon it, to make music accompanied by the voice, hence to celebrate in song and music or to give praise. But again, it's a word that means to strike, to cause an instrument to reverberate. So that's zamar. Okay, so in Greek you've got salo, that's the verb. Hebrew, zamar. Then from the verb in Greek you get psalmos. From the verb in Hebrew we'll get nouns as well, which is the proper name for a psalm. We'll see that as we go on now. Psalm 71 verse 22 says, "Also with the lyre I praise you." The word for praise there is yada, from which we get Yehuda, which means to praise Yehovah. "I praise you for your trustworthiness, O my Elohim. I sing to you with the lyre." Okay, but it's not what the word is. It's I zamar to you with the lyre, which is to pluck or to twang or to cause it to reverberate. Obviously, you can't sing to Yehovah with a wooden instrument, but you can cause the instrument to sing, so to speak, by plucking and twanging it. O set apart one of Yisrael. The word that we would look for to correspond with psalmos, coming from the verb zamar, is zimra. Okay? Music, melody, song is what it says here. In the Strong's definition, it says a musical piece or song to be accompanied by an instrument. So these songs carry the idea of an instrument accompanying them. So in Hebrew, they're called tehillim, which is praises. That corresponds with hymns, as we'll see. But they should be called zimraim, perhaps. Okay, there's a plural of zimra. That would be actually calling it the book of Psalms in Hebrew. So this says, sing to Yehovah with the lyre. Again, to zamar to him with the lyre, not to sing. With the lyre and the voice of a psalm. So here we see the verb, zamar, to play the instrument, essentially. The voice of a psalm, zimra. Psalm 81 verse 2 says, lift up a psalm, a zimra, and beat the tambourine. Okay, so you're making the instrument reverberate. The pleasant lyre with the harp. Okay, so the psalms are always accompanied with instruments. Amos 5 verse 23 says, take away from me the noise of your songs, or the noise of your singings, for I do not hear the sound of your stringed instruments. But that's not what it says, is it? If you look at the Hebrew, it's the psalm of your string instruments. Psalm 4 verse 1, and I've taken this from the King James Version because these little introductions to the Psalms aren't in all translations. I don't actually know why it is. Maybe they're later scribal editions or whatever. But this is written in Hebrew. And we see that when it says psalm, it doesn't say tehillah. It says Mizmor. Okay, a Mizmor of David. We look at Mizmor. Mizmor is also a noun, and it comes from the verb to zamar. So it's the same thing. It's a noun version of this verb, which means to pluck or to twang. Okay, it says in the definition here at the bottom, properly instrumental music, by implication, a poem set to notes, a psalm. Psalm 145 verse 1 says something different. In the King James Version, it says David's psalm of praise. But the word psalm of aren't there. They're italicized. So it basically says David's praise, and that word is Tehillah. David's praise. So a Tehillah is a song of praise. I will extol thee. I will lift thee up. My God, O King, I will bless thy name forever and ever. So these things, whether they're psalms and they're played on instruments and accompanied with vocals, or whether they're just songs of praise, these are methods by which we exalt Yehovah. Psalm 51 verse 15 says, O Yehovah, open my lips, and that my mouth declare your praise, it says in the English, but it's not halal, and it's not yada, okay, it's tehillah, and that's something that's different. It's my mouth declare your tehillah, okay, like your song of praise. Psalm 148 verse 14 says, he also lifts up the horn of his people, the tehillah of all his kind ones. Okay, so again, we can get better understanding. It's not the praise of his kind ones, his chassid. Of the children of Yisrael, a people near to him, praise Yah. Okay, I don't know why a lot of English translations don't translate that as hallelujah, but that's literally what it says in the Hebrew there. So the praise of all his kind ones, the tehillah, in the plural being tehillim, songs of praise. In the Septuagint, we can see where it says tehillah, the word there is hymnos, which we would think of as a hymn. So when we think of a psalm is played on an instrument accompanied by singing. Hymnos is a song of praise. So hymns are songs of praise. In Psalm 106 verse 12 in the Masoretic text, it says, then they believed his words, they sang his praise, tehillah. Okay. Verb, shir, that's what they were doing. His praise, no, his tehillah. Interestingly, in the Septuagint, it's not the word hymnos, it's this word enesis. Okay, and what this means, okay, it's a praise or a thank offering which is given. So again, the Hebrew word is tehillah. In the Greek, they most often render it as hymnos. Here they've made the choice to render it as praise or a thank offering, which we see to be singing in the New Testament. Isaiah 42 verse 10 says, sing a new hymnos to the Lord in the Septuagint. Sing a new hymn, sing a new song of praise is what this phrase means. But they've kind of contracted what it says in the Hebrew. In the Hebrew, it says, sing a new song, his tehillah. Okay, so this song, they've taken that out, and they've just said, what is this song? It's a hymn. Okay, so sing a new hymn is what they've contracted it to. From the ends of the earth, you who go down to the sea and all that is in it, you coastlands and you inhabitants of them. Let the wilderness and its cities lift up their voice. The villages where Kedar dwells, let the inhabitants of Selah sing and let them shout. And we'll look at those words. From the top of the mountains, let them give esteem to Yehovah. Okay, that's glory. In other words, let them give glory, weight, esteem to Yehovah, and declare his tehillah, declare his hymn in the coastlands. Okay, so when they're doing this, when they're singing this new song, and we saw in Revelation that it's in relation to the things that he's doing, these are the people who are in Selah. Okay, let them lift up their voice. But what they're doing, okay, they're singing and they're shouting, but the words aren't shir, and the Hebrew word for shout. The words are renan and zavach. So we get a lot more kind of depth of what they're actually doing when we understand what it is to renan or what it is to zavach. Okay, so what it is to renan, it says here, one interpretation is to overcome, but it's to cry out, could be to shout for joy, it's to give a ringing cry. That's what it means. We'll see it used in another context where it's not a shout of joy. It's just basically this exclamation to Yehovah, okay, to shout out. Same with the word zavach. It means to shout or to cry aloud or to cry out. And as we're going to see, these things are in response to these great feelings of emotion within somebody. They ranan to Yehovah, they zavach to Yehovah. And that's what is pleasing to him. Leviticus 9 verse 24, we see the word renan used to mean a different sort of crying out. Fire came out from before Yehovah, consumed the burnt offering and the fat on the altar, and all the people saw, and they rananed and fell on their faces. So it's kind of like this response, this emotional response. They see this happen, the fire comes out and consumes Nadab and Abihu, and then they ranan. Job 29 verse 13 says, the blessing of the perishing one will come upon me, and I made the widow's heart renan. Okay, to shout for joy is the context of it, but you can see how the English is just approximating what's said in the Hebrew. A renan in this context would be to renan for joy, presumably, and that's how it's translated. Job 38 verse 7 says, when the morning stars rananed together, okay, to shout for joy together, it's translated sometimes. And the sons of Elohim shouted for joy, okay. That word is to ruah, and we should be familiar with the idea of ruah from the word teruah, which is the blast on a trumpet. So if we look at this word translated as shout for joy, it could be sing for joy, it could be, whatever translation. To shout, to raise a sound, cry out, to give a blast. Okay, to shout in applause, to shout with religious impulse, to cry out in distress, all of those things are to ruah. But these are what these things are. They're expressions from Yehovah's people. They cry out. And we see them doing this when they're singing to Yehovah because of this great swelling joy that these people are experiencing when they see his works and they understand who he is. Psalm 27 verse 6 says, and now my head is lifted above my enemies all around me, and I offer in his tent with sacrifices shouts of joy. It doesn't say shout and then joy though, it says teruah. I sing, yea, I sing praises, although it doesn't say sing praises. It's that verb which means to pluck, okay? I pluck on an instrument to Yehovah. So we've got shouts of joy, teruah, I sing, and I pluck on an instrument to Yehovah. Okay, so the word teruah, commonly this means when it's done on a trumpet, it's an alarm call. It can also be translated, as you can see there, shout of joy with religious impulse, or a shout of joy in general. It's just this reaction, this calling out in response to whatever emotion. Okay, an acclamation of joy or a battle cry, especially clangor of trumpets as an alarm, joy, jubilee, loud noise, rejoicing, shouting, sounding, all of these things. It's just this crying out though. All of these words carry the same sort of feeling. Okay, now we've got this word, it's gil, and we're going to see where this is used, but this is a really interesting word. It says here in the Strong's definition, properly to spin round under the influence of any violent emotion. Okay, so I'm sure people will be familiar with the idea of if you read something in Yehovah's word, sometimes it can powerfully move you. Okay, you can have just a reaction to a really strong reaction. It might move you to tears. It might move you to do whatever. You see in the outline of biblical usage, it says to rejoice, to exult, or be glad. And it says to rejoice. The second meaning is to tremble from fear. So it's this emotive reaction in people, which is why you see something bizarre like serve Yehovah with fear and rejoice with trembling. It doesn't actually say rejoice with trembling. It says geel with trembling. Have this violent spinning round of emotion with trembling. Okay, samach is another word that is commonly used in these contexts. That means to rejoice or be glad. This can be translated as to exult before Yehovah, rejoice before Yehovah. See that used in Psalm 32 verse 11. Be glad in Yehovah. Okay, samach in Yehovah, and exult, geel, spin round in a violent emotion of joy. You righteous, and renan, all you upright in heart. Okay, so this translation, shout for joy, you can tell it's correct because it starts by saying samach in Yehovah, which means strictly to rejoice and to be glad. Exult, you righteous, and shout for joy. All of these things, again, the kind of like an outpouring of these emotions which are within. Deuteronomy 12:11-12 says, and it shall be that unto the place which Yehovah your Elohim chooses to make his name dwell there, that you are to bring all that I command you, your burnt offerings, your tithes, the contributions of your hand, and all your choice offerings which you vow to Yehovah. And you shall samach before Yehovah your Elohim. So when you go up to Jerusalem, this means purely to rejoice and to be glad in these things, to eat before Yehovah. You, your sons, your daughters, your male servants, your female servants, and the Levite who is within your gates. Exodus 4 verse 14 says, the displeasure of Yehovah burned against Moshe, and he said, is not Aharon the Levite your brother? I know that he speaks well, and see, he's coming out to meet you. When he sees you, he shall samach in his heart. Psalm 35 verse 9 says, but let my own soul geel in Yehovah. Okay, so we've got Aharon samaching, being glad and rejoicing in his heart. Here we see the soul geeling, okay, to spin round in violent emotion. The form that this took with David, okay, when he geeled, when he had this reaction within himself, when he samached in his heart, the form that it took for him was to get naked and to dance before Yehovah. Okay, that's not like objectively a good reaction to have. Yehovah doesn't want everyone to dance naked before him, because what that is, if you like, a symptom and not the cause. The cause is that he geeled. The cause is that he was joyful. He was overcome with joy in his heart. And the way that David expressed it was to dance naked. Okay? I went to a conference recently, and the people who were doing the worship there, they were saying, you know, they were playing music and they were saying, oh, if people don't want to dance and don't want to sing because you feel a bit embarrassed, be like David, because that's pleasing before the Lord. You know, David stripped naked and he danced, and that's great. And I think that's almost a damaging thing to tell people, okay, that if you don't have a genuine expression outwardly of joy, that you want to burst into song or you want to dance, that's somehow pleasing to Yehovah, because that's not what's pleasing to Yehovah. What's pleasing to Yehovah is that inside you, that geel, that being overcome with that violent emotion. That's what he wants. And people will express that in whatever ways they want to express it. It is massively pleasing to the Lord if somebody has that emotion within them and they want to burst into song, they want to play on an instrument to Yehovah, they want to dance naked before him. That's pleasing to him, but not because of what they're doing. It's not like the individual acts are the things that he finds pleasing. The thing that he finds pleasing is what's going on within somebody. 2 Samuel 6 verse 16 says, it came to be when the ark of Yehovah came into the city of David, that Michal, daughter of Shaul, looked through a window and saw King David leaping and dancing before Yehovah, and she despised him in her heart. She lightly esteemed him. She thought that he was an idiot for doing it. Let's think about what's happened here. The ark of Yehovah, the ark of the covenant, has returned to the city of David, and David has this amazing expression of joy. He giggles within himself, and he renanes and he dances. 1 Samuel 1 verse 13 says, and Hannah spoke in her heart. Only her lips moved, but her voice was not heard. So if it comes to it, you know, when people are singing songs to Yehovah and you think, I don't really know that I want to sing here. Like for me, I can't sing. So the last thing that I want to be doing is like belting out a tune loud in front of people and sounding terrible. But you don't have to feel like that is what Yehovah finds pleasing, because it's not in you. It would not be a genuine expression of that joy which is inside of you. Okay? What he's looking for is what's going on inside of you, not the individual way that you choose to express that. He will be pleased if you have a genuine expression of that joy. And Charlie's going to hate me saying this because he has to get up and play music in front of people, and I know that it's a heavy burden to get up in front of people and to try and like bring everyone into song and dance or whatever. And you know, we've spoken before about what a weird dynamic it is. You know, Charlie plays praise and worship, doesn't he? And what a weird dynamic it is, because he doesn't know how to feel when he's playing in front of people. He's like, is this a concert? Is everybody here to watch the music? Or, you know, everybody should be praising Yehovah, so it's a funny thing. So I'm not trying to get everyone to not sing. I think Charlie would hate that. But the idea of like praise, you know, people who become famous for doing praise and things like that, it's just a really weird dynamic, because what's actually happening there, what Yehovah wants from people is to have this amazing feeling of joy when they realize who he is. They read something in the word, they're powerfully moved by it. Maybe they cry, maybe they sing, whatever they do. Maybe they silently pray to Yehovah. That's what's actually pleasing to him. That whole dynamic of praise music is weird, because music's an emotive thing. And if you're down there, to Yehovah's perspective, you're down there and you're responding emotively to the music, that must be displeasing to him, because what he wants you to be responding emotively to is to him. And he wants you to be singing out, praising, dancing naked or whatever to him. Whereas people get caught up in these emotive bits of music, and then they're giggling, but because of the music, not because of Yehovah. Ephesians 5:18-19 says, do not be drunk with wine, in which is loose behavior, but be filled with the Spirit, speaking to each other again in psalms, psalmos, songs of praise, hymnos, spiritual songs, singing and soloing, striking the strings in your heart to the Master. Again, it doesn't have to be an outward expression. What he's looking for is what's going on within you. Psalm 68 verse 4 says, sing to Elohim, sing praises, or strum again, twang the instrument, make it reverberate to his name. Salal him, lift him up, exalt him who rides through the deserts by his name, Yah, and rejoice before him. Zephaniah 3 verse 17 says, Yehovah your Elohim in your midst is mighty to save. He rejoices over you with joy. It says he is silent in his love. He giggles over you with singing, with rana, related to the word to rana, without having to go into these things in too much depth. But he has this overwhelming, spinning, violent emotion over us. He has this ranaing, not that he is singing necessarily, he might be, but it says he's silent in his love and he giggles over us over us with ranaring, with this amazing expression, this amazing outburst. Quite amazing to think of Yehovah being like that over us. Psalm 108, 1-7 says, O Elohim, my heart is steadfast. I shear and I zamar. Okay, so to sing and I pluck on the instrument. Even my esteem, okay? Awake, harp and lyre, I awake the dawn. And I love this kind of imagery in what's said here. He's saying, I'm going to awake the harp and lyre. I'm going to make the dawn awake. I'm going to play on a stringed instrument. Again, it's not Yehovah saying, I want everyone to go out and learn the stringed instruments, because that in and of itself is pleasing to me. But the expression of it is to pick it up and to express that joy and to play on the instruments. I praise you, O Yehovah, among peoples, and I zamar to you among the nations. I pluck or bang on the tambourine or whatever to you among the nations. For your kindness is great above the heavens, and your truth reaches to the clouds. So all of these things where people are bursting into song, it's because of what he's done in their lives, and because of his great works, and they're exalting him in all these things. Exalt yourself above the heavens. Lift yourself up above the heavens, O Elohim, and your esteem, your weight, your consequence above the earth, in order that those you love might be delivered. Save with your right hand and answer me. Elohim has spoken in his holiness, his set apartness. I will rejoice. I portion out Shechem, and I measure out the valley of Succoth. 1 Chronicles 16, 23-29 says, Sing to Yehovah, all the earth. Proclaim his deliverance or his salvation from day to day. Declare his weight, his esteem, his glory among the nations, his wonders among all people. For great is Yehovah and greatly to be praised. He is to be feared above all gods. All the gods of the peoples are matters of naught, but Yehovah made the heavens. Charlie's spoken about this recently, that there's something about Yehovah being creator of the heavens and the earth. It is to exalt him. It's to speak of his works. These things are important for us to do. Excellency and splendor are before him. Strength and gladness are in his place. Ascribe to Yehovah, O clans of the peoples. Ascribe to Yehovah kavod and strength. Ascribe to Yehovah the kavod of his name. Bring a mincha and come before him. Bow yourself to Yehovah in the beauty of holiness. And again, like I mentioned, you see these things in there which are kind of like, as we'll see as we go on, the things that Yehovah asks us to do that maybe people from the outside are going to think are a bit weird. But we're to speak of Yehovah and exalt him and speak of everything that he's done. All of his works. We're not to water down what he's done. We're to exalt him to men. So Exodus 15 says, Then Moshe and the children of Yisrael sang this song to Yehovah and spoke, saying, I sing to Yehovah, for he is highly exalted. That's why. The horse and the rider he's thrown into the sea. These are the sorts of things that you see in all the other exaltations of him in the Psalms that we were reading before. These things are mentioned. The horse and the rider he's overthrown. Yah is my strength and my song. And that's Simrath, which also comes from Zamar, to pluck. He has become my deliverance. He is my ale, and I beautify him. Elohim of my father, and I exalt him. I lift him up. Yehovah is a man of battle. Yehovah is his name. He has cast Pharaoh's chariots and his army into the sea, and his chosen officers are drowned in the sea of reeds. The depths covered them. They went down to the bottom like a stone. Your right hand, O Yehovah, has become great in power. Your right hand, O Yehovah, has crushed the enemy. And in the greatness of your excellence, you pulled down those who rose up against you. You sent forth your wrath. It consumed them like stubble. And with the wind of your nostrils, the waters were heaped up. The flood stood like a wall. The depths became dense in the heart of the sea. The enemy said, I pursue, I overtake, I divide the spoil. My soul is satisfied on them. I draw out my sword, and my hand destroys them. You did blow with your ruach. The sea covered them. They sank like lead in the mighty waters. Who is like you, O Yehovah, among the gods? Who is like you, great in set apartness, awesome in tehillah, working wonders? You stretched out your right hand, the earth swallowed them. In your kindness, you led the people whom you have redeemed. In your strength, you guided them to your set-apart dwelling. Obviously, his name is inherent in all of this. It's intrinsic to exalting him. Okay, he wants to be exalted in Pharaoh. But what does he say? In Pharaoh is going to see my patience with the vessels of wrath fitted for destruction. Peoples heard, they trembled, anguish gripped the inhabitants of Philistia. Then the chiefs of Edom were troubled, the mighty men of Moab, trembling grips them, all the inhabitants of Canaan. And we looked last year at how these things are true of us when we enter into Mount Zion. These things are prophetic of them. Obviously, they didn't have the chiefs of the Edomites chasing after them at this point, or the inhabitants of Philistia. This is more relevant to our entry into Mount Zion. Fear and dread fell on them. By the greatness of your arm, they are as silent as a stone until your people pass over, O Yehovah, until the people whom you have brought pass over. And that is an amazing image. I mentioned it last year, the idea that those who are in Sheol, okay, the good on one side, the wicked on the other, and when those who are dead in Messiah pass over in the midst of the sea to come out, how the people who are on the shores, on the other side of Sheol, are silent as a stone. Okay, the kings, it said that the kings did not speak, or they were silent because they had seen what had not been recounted to them. You bring them in and plant them in the mountain of your inheritance, in the place, O Yehovah, which you have made for your own dwelling. Okay, so again, this is Mount Zion. The set-apart place, O Yehovah, which your hands have prepared. Yehovah reigns forever and ever. For the horses of Pharaoh went in with his chariots and his horsemen into the sea, and Yehovah brought back the waters of the sea upon them, and the children of Israel went on dry ground in the midst of the sea. And Miriam the prophetess, the sister of Aharon, took the timbrel in her hand, and all the women went out after her with timbrels and with dances. So they go out and they zamar before Yehovah, and they sing tehillah to him. And Miriam answered them, sing to Yehovah, for he is highly exalted. Again, this is the reasoning. The horse and its rider he's thrown into the sea. And Jeremiah 23:7-8 says, therefore, see, days are coming in affirmation of Yehovah, and they do not say anymore, Yehovah lives, who brought up the children of Israel out of the land of Mitzrayim, but Yehovah lives, who brought up and led the seed of the house of Israel out of the land of the north, and from all lands where I had driven them, and they've dwelt on their own soil. Okay, so if that was amazing, and if afterwards they crossed over the Red Sea, and they're all singing, and they're all exalting, and they're all renanning, and they're all geeling, imagine what it's going to be like for us in the future when his works are even greater on the earth and the nations see that he's Yehovah. In the third part, we're going to look at how we're not to be ashamed of these things and how we are to exalt him before men and our attitudes to speaking these things. So the end of Exodus 15, verse 22 says, and Moshe brought Yisrael from the Sea of Reeds, and they went out into the wilderness of Shur. And they went 3 days into the wilderness, and they found no water, and they came to Marah, and they were unable to drink the waters of Marah, for they were bitter. So the name of it was called Marah, which means bitter. The people grumbled against Moshe, saying, what are we to drink? Then he cried out to Yehovah. Yehovah showed him a tree. When he threw it into the waters were made sweet. There he made a chok, a law or a statute and justice for them, mishpat for them. And there he tried them. And it's a really kind of weird verse, this. He made a statute and justice or judgment, mishpat for them. And there he tried them. It's kind of, the whole thing's like an encapsulation of what happens to us, because we know that bitterness, we've looked at it recently, a root of bitterness springing up, causing trouble, causes rebellion. It's kind of disobedience is what's associated with bitterness in the scriptures. And then we've got Moshe crying out to Yehovah, and Yehovah shows him a tree. Okay, and when he puts it in the bitterness, it makes it sweet. Well, we know that the Torah is sweet as honey throughout the scriptures. And we also know that the Torah is described as a tree of life to those who embrace her in Proverbs 3. So we kind of get this encapsulation of going from rebellion and disobedience to the Torah being what then makes the waters sweet. And then it says, then he made a statute and justice for them, and there he tried them. So then a law is given, and he tests them in that law. It's all quite weird, but we can see what the imagery is. Verse 26 says, and he said, if you diligently obey the voice of Yehovah your Elohim, and do what is right in his eyes, and shall listen to his commands, his mitzvot, and shall cherish all of his statutes, I shall bring on you none of the diseases I brought on the Mitzrites, for I am Yehovah who heals you. So we don't actually know what it was that he tested them in here, but he gives them a statute and he gives them justice, and he tests them in it. And then he says, if you follow his commands, okay, when he savas, when he commands something, and you cherish his laws and they're dear to you, then he will take away the diseases that they saw in Egypt. And this is all quite interesting to me, because what I take from this when I see this, the cherishing of it, and I'm thinking about the lifting up of these things and exalting them and giving weight to them. Okay, it makes me think of that quote, imitation is the sincerest form of flattery. I like this version of it. Imitation is not just the sincerest form of flattery, it's the sincerest form of learning. Because Oscar Wilde, when he originally said it, said, imitation's the sincerest form of flattery that mediocrity can play to greatness. Okay. But I think this is more accurate for what the scriptures are talking about. It's a reflection of some scriptural truth, this, because we imitate Yehovah. And when I was talking before about praise and worship, people use this word worship and they make it about playing music. And it's not about playing music. Worship is this exalting of Yehovah, to give him weight and to give him consequence in your life. That's what it is to worship him. And when you worship him and you give him that consequence and you lift him up and you acknowledge his goodness and his set apartness, what it causes you to do as a result is to imitate him. And it is this sincerest form of acknowledging who he is. Maybe flattery is the wrong word, but of acknowledging his value. The sincerest way of doing that is to imitate him, and it's the sincerest form of learning. It shows that you have actually learnt these things. Romans 8:29, those whom he knew beforehand, he ordained beforehand to be conformed to the image of his son. Okay, so those who are chosen are those who are going to imitate Yeshua. And it all comes from the things we've talked about recently, this fear of Yehovah, this acknowledgement of who he is, this love for him. Okay, this appreciation for who he is, this lifting up of him, this giving him weight, all of these things, and causes you to imitate him, and they're the ones that he chooses. Ephesians 5 verse 1 says, become them imitators of Elohim as beloved children. Okay, and the Greek word, I can't remember what it is, memetes or something like that. It's very close to imitate. It's what we would translate as imitate. 1 Corinthians 11 verse 1 says, become imitators of me as I also am of Messiah. So Paul's not saying, do the things that I do. When I get up at 7:30, I brush my teeth and I do no, imitate that. Imitate me in as far as I am imitating the Messiah. 1 Thessalonians 1, 6-10 says, and you became imitators of us and of the Master, having received the word in much pressure with joy of the set-apart Spirit, so that you became an example to all who believe in Macedonia and Achaia. For from you the word of the Master has sounded forth. And inherent in this is this idea of what it is to exalt Yahovah. The word of Yahovah has sounded forth from you. You're exalting it. You're being this example before people. And by being this example, they learn the word of Elohim. You became an example to all who believe, not only in Macedonia and Achaia, but also in every place your belief toward Elohim has gone out. And this is what we speak of when we speak of being a light to other people. Okay, they see what you're doing, and you can convince them much more about the word of Elohim than you can with trying to persuade them with words of man's wisdom. So that it's unnecessary for us to say whatever, for they themselves report what kind of reception we had with you and how you turned to Elohim from idols to serve the living and true Elohim. And the example that I always think of when I think of this is Mel when she gave up smoking. Okay, so she smoked a load of ciggies every day, and she just gave them up out of nowhere, something which anyone around her would have appreciated as being completely impossible for her to do, just in herself. Okay, so the people around her would report what she had done in what she was in her service of Elohim. And to wait for his Son from the heavens, whom he raised from the dead, Yeshua, who is delivering us from the wrath to come. And this raising of Yeshua from the dead and the crucifixion are things that we'll see as we go through this as important things for people to understand from what we represent. People have different ways of evangelizing to people, don't they? When they go out, what people tend to do is they focus on a part of the word, something that they're going to tell people about. This fella thinks that everybody needs to know that the world's going to come to an end soon and that they all need to repent of their sin, presumably. And so this is what he's focused on, and he's decided to go and tell everyone about this. Okay, you get people going out street preaching, and some of these examples are better than other examples of telling people about Elohim. And the thing with all of these things is, I'm not trying to sneer at these people. These people go out with good intentions and they're trying to tell people about the Lord, but the way that they're doing it is they're focusing on something which is a part of the whole and which can only exist as a part of the whole. And if you isolate it on its own, it gives people the wrong message. Okay, you get people going out to Africa. I'm not saying these people are bad people. I'm not sneering at these people. They've gone out to Africa. Think of what it is, what sort of sacrifice it is to give up your life and to go out to another country to spread the gospel. Okay, these people coming from a good place, but I think about what they're actually spreading here and the Jesus that they're spreading, and it's perhaps not going to do these people any good. And Yahovah can use all of these things for his good. He can use these people's half attempts to tell people about him to actually bring them to himself. If that's what he wants to do, he can. But they're focusing on these individual little components. Okay, and you get your evangelism programs, which is what I was talking about with the stones, which are hewn stones that are shaped by man and by man's tools rather than just being natural unhewn stones that come about, which is how we're to do evangelism. We're to be an example to people, and when conversations come up organically we can speak to them and all of those sort of things. That's your unhewn stones. And you get people who profane Yahovah's name, who teach people that the God of Scripture is hateful and that he's abhorrent. People aren't going to want to get to know any more detail about what the actual context of any of this is. Not that any of it's right in the correct context anyway, but they present a false picture of Yahovah. So as I say, some of these things are better than others. This woman, Nancy Duarte, gives some advice in her quote here, in this quote of man's wisdom, which may well be relevant and useful in other situations. But this is what people do with the word of Elohim. She says, spending energy to understand the audience and carefully crafting a message that resonates with them means making a commitment of time and discipline to the process. And obviously, rhetorically, what she's saying is that that's a good thing to do, and that's how you need to do things when you're delivering a message to them. And if we were delivering a message of something of the world to these people, then this is what you would need to do, and this would be useful. But regrettably, this is what people do when they're trying to tell people about who Yehovah is. And what they end up doing is kind of creating a version of him that they think is going to be appealing to other people, as if they're going to lure people in and entice them, and then they're going to turn to Yehovah. The thing is, when we do these sorts of things, we might well convince people. We might well be able to draw them in. But those people are responding to something other than Yehovah. What we're actually supposed to do is to exalt him in describing the entirety of him, not holding anything back. And the ways that he tells us in Scripture to speak of him are interesting, because they contain things that naturally perhaps we would want to omit, because we would think, well, people are going to think that he's cruel or that he's vindictive or whatever we imagine that they're going to react to it with. The idea of using man's wisdom, okay, the idea of using the intelligence of man or man's understanding of things, philosophies and all of that sort of stuff, in with the Scriptures is actually dealt with explicitly by Paul. And I've read these passages many times, but when I was going through this, certain things came out to it that I've not seen in them before. It says, and when I came to you, brothers, I did not come with excellence of speech or wisdom, proclaiming to you the witness of Elohim. Okay, so the way that he approaches them is not to come with persuasive words or this message that he's crafted because he understands his audience or anything like that. He says, for I resolved not to know any matter among you except Yeshua, Messiah, and him crucified. Now that's interesting, because it actually turns out that is the only thing which has any power, the only thing which can appeal to somebody and is going to show them Yehovah. See, we exalt all of his name, okay, but this in particular is going to be recognized by the people that Elohim is drawing to him. It says, and I was with you in weakness and in fear and in much trembling. And my word and my preaching were not with persuasive words of man's wisdom, but in demonstration of the Spirit and of power. And that's what we've talked about before. Okay, so you demonstrate to people. You don't come and try to persuade them. You demonstrate them. In order that your belief should not be in the wisdom of men, but in the power of Elohim. People very often get this idea of, well, we need to go and reach these people in the world, and they have no other way of hearing the gospel message than if we package it in this form or we package it in that form, and we're going to create this carefully crafted message to reach these people that we think should be reached. And we're going to do it in this way, and we're going to dress it all up in an allegory that we think of, or whatever that looks like. Okay, but what that actually achieves when it's with the wisdom of men rather than stating the word of Elohim, which has actual power and they will respond to spiritually, what they get convinced over is men's wisdom, and their belief is no longer in the power of Elohim, was not in the power of Elohim. Their belief is in whatever method you chose to deliver it to them in. Yet we speak wisdom among those who are perfect, and not the wisdom of this age, nor of the rulers of this age that are being brought to naught. Okay, so among us, we speak wisdom, the wisdom of Elohim. We speak the wisdom of Elohim, which was hidden in a secret, and which Elohim ordained before the ages for our esteem. This idea of us being ransomed from the power of death, which no one of the rulers of this age knew. For if they had known, they would not have crucified the master of esteem. But as it has been written, eye has not seen, ear has not heard, nor have entered into the heart of man what Elohim has prepared for those who love him. And that's quite an interesting thing for us to think about. But what it goes on to say after this is even more interesting. It says, but Elohim has revealed them to us through his Spirit. For the Spirit searches all matters, even the depths of Elohim. So these are things that cannot be seen with the eye. The ear cannot hear these things, and they've never even entered into the heart of man. But we can understand these things, and we renan and we geel in them. Sometimes when we read scripture, we get like this insight into what the world to come is going to be like, or this insight into Yehovah's character that's revealed through his Spirit. It says, for who among men knows the thoughts of a man except the spirit of a man that's in him? So also the thoughts of Elohim no one has known except the Spirit of Elohim. So man's eyes, man's ears have not comprehended these things. Okay, it takes the Spirit of Elohim to know the mind of Elohim. And we have received not the spirit of the world, but the Spirit that is from Elohim, in order to know what Elohim has favorably given us. It says, which we also speak, not in words which man's wisdom teaches, but which the set-apart Spirit teaches, comparing spiritual matters with spiritual matters. So what does he mean by that? Not in words which man's wisdom teaches. The words which the Spirit teaches are the word of Elohim, and this is what it takes to reach somebody. Okay, you speak the word to them. Now, as I say, you might speak words of man's wisdom to them, and that might make them read the Bible, and then Elohim might use that to bring them to himself. That's not what I'm talking about. Saying the way that we speak these matters should be by the word of Elohim. We should tell them what the word of Elohim says, not in our little way of conveying the word to them. The natural man does not receive the matters of the Spirit of Elohim, for they are foolishness to him. He's unable to know them because they're spiritually discerned. So this is the response that you're actually going to get in most people. When you speak to them, most people are going to think the things that you say are foolishness. But what you shouldn't do is try to preempt that and say, I'm going to say it in a way that they're not going to think is foolishness. He who is spiritual discerns all, but he himself is discerned by no one. Okay, we're strangers and we're pilgrims in the earth. For who has known the mind of Yehovah? Who shall instruct him? But we have the mind of Messiah. Okay, and we have his Spirit. Now, Mark 8, verse 38 is a very important thing for us to consider. It says, whoever is ashamed of me and my words in this adulterous and sinning generation, of him the Son of Adam shall be ashamed when he comes in the esteem of his Father with the set-apart angels. Okay, so if you think, I'm not going to give this particular detail about the word, when someone asks you something and you respond to them by telling them everything apart from this one detail, because you think people are going to think this is silly, that Elohim asked me to do this or Elohim asked me to do that. So actually what I'm going to do is I'm going to keep that bit back. Okay, what that is doing is to be ashamed of his word. Okay, we're to speak the fullness of it, and it is that which has power, and it's only that can reach the people who are going to be reached. If you're trying to reach other people, what you're actually trying to do is reach people who are perishing, not those who are going to be saved. Those who are going to be saved are going to respond to his word. Those who are perishing are going to think it's foolishness. But if you're trying to reach them, that's going to be fruitless, because even if you reach them, you've reached them with something that is false. You've not reached them with who Elohim is. Genesis 6, 5-8 says, and Yehovah saw that the wickedness of man was great in the earth, and that every inclination of the thoughts of his heart was only evil continually. And Yehovah was sorry that he had made man on the earth, and he was grieved in his heart. And Yehovah said, I am going to wipe off man whom I have created from the face of the earth, both man and beast, creeping creature and birds of the heavens, for I am sorry that I've made them. But Noah found favor in the eyes of Yehovah. So if you come to a conversation with an atheist, there is sort of people that hate the scriptures and hate Elohim, and they say, what about the flood? What about the flood? And you try to explain it to them through the words of man's wisdom. You try to explain it to them this way or that way, or what was really happening was this, or it was the Nephilim and all the genetics have been corrupted and Yehovah needed to wipe. No. When they say to you, why is it that Elohim destroyed everyone in a flood? What you should say is that he saw the wickedness of man was great in the earth, and that every inclination of the thoughts of his heart was only evil continually. And he was sorry that he made man on the earth, and he was grieved in his heart because of the wickedness of man. And he said, I'm going to wipe off man and the living creatures from the earth. But Noah, who was just, found grace in his eyes, and Noah was saved. And that will have power with them. And to some people, most people, that's going to be utter foolishness, and they will reject what you've said. But it's not your job to edit that and doctor it in a way that makes it more palatable for them to receive. Because those people who don't receive it as this are not the people that you're trying to reach anyway. Romans 1:18-21 says, the wrath of Elohim is revealed from heaven against all wickedness and unrighteousness of men who suppress the truth in unrighteousness, because that which is known of Elohim is manifest among them, for Elohim has manifested it to them. For since the creation of the world, his invisible qualities have been clearly seen, being understood from what was been made, both his everlasting power and his divine nature, for them to be without excuse. Because although they knew Elohim, and they knew Elohim from the creation itself, you can discern his divine nature, you can discern that there's good and that there's evil and all the other things, you can discern that from the creation. Because although they knew that, they didn't esteem him as Elohim. Okay, they didn't give him weight as Elohim. They knew all of those things, nor gave him thanks. They became vain in their reasonings. So they're going to think that it's foolishness, because to their reasonings, their vain reasonings, because they've rejected the character of Elohim, it's going to be foolishness. And trying to reach these people isn't going to work. Okay, so when you speak of who Yehovah is to people, speak of exactly who he is. Speak of the things that he did. Speak of his works. Exalt him properly, because you're not going to convince anybody. The word will convince people. You might be able to convince them of something, but you're not going to be convincing them of Yehovah. Acts 17:30-32 says, truly then, having overlooked these times of ignorance, Elohim now commands all men everywhere to repent. Okay, that's something to tell people, isn't it? Because he has set a day on which he's going to judge the world in righteousness by a man whom he has appointed, having given proof of this to all by raising him to the dead. This is what Paul went to a city and was telling people. The hearing of the resurrection of the dead, at the hearing of the resurrection of the dead, some indeed mocked, while others said, we shall hear you again concerning this. You might think when you're speaking to somebody, I'm not going to tell them that Elohim's going to judge everybody and that there's going to be a resurrection of the dead. They're going to think that I'm insane. They're going to think that that's foolishness. And some people had that reaction, but we're not to worry about that. We don't edit the truth, because some people are going to think it's foolishness. We're guaranteed that some people will think it's foolishness. But others said, we shall hear you again concerning this. Okay, again, just through the creation, they can know Elohim, they can know what's right and they can know what's wrong. They can go astray from that when their minds are darkened through vain reasonings about things. But some people are going to recognize the truth of what's said, because they will know Elohim. They'll be able to see him. Jeremiah 9:23-24 says, thus said Yehovah, let not the wise boast in his wisdom, let not the mighty boast in his might, nor let the rich boast in his riches. But let him who boasts boast of this, that he understands and knows me, that I am Yehovah, doing kindness, justice, and righteousness in the earth. Again, What is it? It's his name that you're sharing with people. In these I delight. So when you're telling him, when you're telling people about this Elohim, you're telling them who he actually is. Don't just focus on, oh, he's really kind, and he's really lovely, and he was doing this because of that, and kind of trying to lovelyfy Yahovah because you're trying to appeal to them, and you've come up with an Elohim that you think they're going to really like. Okay? Tell them who he actually is. He does kindness, he does justice, and he does righteousness on the earth. 1 Corinthians 1:9-31. Elohim is trustworthy, by whom you were called into the fellowship of his Son, Yeshua Messiah, our Master. And I appeal to you, brothers, by the name of our Master, Yeshua Messiah, that you all agree, and there be no divisions among you, but that you be knit together in the same mind and in the same opinion. Okay, that's quite a statement. What's meant by this? Okay. For I've been informed concerning you, my brothers, by those of the house of Chloe, that there are strifes among you. What I mean is this, that each one of you says, I'm of Shaul, or I am of Apollos, or I am of Peter, or I am of the Messiah. Has the Messiah been divided? Was Paul crucified for you? Or were you baptized into the name of Paul? So what this invites us to, and what this tells us the situation should be, is that we should not be dividing with people. Okay, Messiah crucified is the important thing. Now that exists in a very important context. Now I call upon you, brothers, watch out for those who cause divisions and stumbling contrary to the teaching which you've learned. Turn away from them. For such ones do not serve our Master Yeshua Messiah, but their own stomach, and by smooth words and flattering speech they deceive the hearts of the innocent. So, we are to divide from people who are teaching another Yeshua, another spirit, another gospel. Okay, people who water down the gospel and say, oh, I know the Torah says to do that, but maybe you can do it a bit differently, and don't worry if you're not doing this, or you're not submitted to him, or whatever it is. From those sorts of people, you turn away. The people that we're not to divide from are the people who get those basics of the death of Messiah, the resurrection of Messiah, the resurrection of the dead, that we are to die to self. We put our old self and our old desires to death, and we walk in the newness of life, the Torah. We walk in righteousness, then we've submitted to him. Okay, so the people who get that, you're not to divide from. Whether it be over things like the calendar, or interpretations of prophecy, or whatever that looks like, the little minute things, you don't have division over those sorts of things. You of course divide from people who are doing unrighteousness and teaching unrighteousness, even by their actions and their attitude to the Torah and things like that, all that ugliness. You don't divide from the people who recognize those core fundamentals. Okay, it says in Ephesians that we're to have pastors and teachers who will bring us together into unity until the Messiah comes. So if you are sat under somebody who teaches, maybe go with what they say about the calendar. Maybe if you've got problems with it, go and approach them and talk through those things with them. Prophecy, whatever it is, okay? But we are to be united on the major things. So with believers who believe, I do the Torah, I put myself to death, I have repented, and to repent means to stop sinning, and I'm not on a journey where I will eventually get to obedience. I start with obedience, and I'm on a journey which develops that obedience. With those sorts of people, we're not to divide on little things. Your obedience indeed is reported to all. Therefore, I rejoice concerning you. But I wish you to be wise indeed as to the good, and simple towards the evil. And this is a really interesting concept. Okay, to be wise towards the good and simple towards the evil. Okay? You can be wise as to the good in a situation. If you see I don't know. You can use that example again of the calendar. Okay, you start fellowshipping with some people and they keep a different calendar to you. In that situation, you can be wise unto the good. And if you think they're wrong about that, you can be simple as to the evil of that situation. But this word simple comes up in some interesting places we'll see, so we can understand it. It says, the Elohim of peace shall crush Hasatan under your feet shortly. Okay, all the causes of sin and sinners will be removed from his kingdom. In Matthew 10:16-18, it says, see, I send you out as sheep in the midst of wolves. Therefore, be wise as serpents and innocent as doves. Paul say, be wise unto the good and simple, innocent as to the evil. Don't be ignorant of it, though. Messiah makes sure to say, don't be ignorant next. He says, but beware of men, for they shall deliver you up into Sanhedrins and flog you in their congregations, and you shall be brought before governors and kings for my sake, as a witness to them and to the Gentiles. So he's saying, look, beware of people, though, because they might just take you to be flogged and brought in front of governors. But he says, be wise. We're wise as to the good and innocent to the evil. We're not trying to learn the evil machinations of everything. We're not trying to discover sin in other people. We can leave those sorts of things to Yehovah. If we think that somebody's wrong in their interpretation of a prophecy or the calendar that they follow or all of those little things that people like to divide on, okay, we can be simple as to that, and we can leave that with Yehovah. Philippians 2:12-15 says, so that my beloved, you always obeyed, not only in my presence, but now much rather in my absence. Work out your own deliverance or salvation with fear and trembling. For it is Elohim who is working in you both to desire and to work for his good pleasure. Do all of that obedience without grumblings and disputings, in order that you may be blameless, and then there's this word here, simple, innocent, faultless, children of Elohim, without blemish in the midst of a crooked and perverse generation, among whom you shine as lights in the world. And that's that same thought that we see in Ephesians 5, where he says, you know, it's a shame to even speak of the things that is done by them in secret. Okay, you can be simple or innocent as to those things. Don't be concerned. The idea is mixing that evil into your mind, which is conveyed in this word, akreos, among whom you shine as lights in the world. And that's what he says, isn't it? He says, rebuke the evil. Okay, or expose the evil. It's in some translations, but the word is to rebuke it. And how do you rebuke it? You rebuke it by walking in the light. Okay, among whom you shine as lights in the world, but be simple as to this evil. Okay, and that's useful, as I'm saying, in when it comes to dividing with people as well. Don't be trying to discover like what they might be doing wrong, or if you think that they've interpreted something wrong. If they've accepted the Messiah and they've accepted that they're to walk out the Torah, and that it's not this wishy-washy version of doing the Torah, they've recognized that they've repented, they've stopped sinning, and that there's no tolerance of sin and all of that stuff, because from those people we're to divide. But as long as they've got that right, then we don't cause divisions. We can be simple as to those things that we think maybe they've got wrong. So Paul continues in 1 Corinthians 1. He says, I thank Elohim that I baptized not one of you except Crispus and Gaius, that no one should say that I baptized into my own name. Now I did also baptize the household of Stephanus. For the rest, I do not know whether I baptized anyone else. For Messiah did not send me to baptize, but to bring the good news, to bring the gospel. Not with wisdom of words, that the cross of Messiah should not be nullified. It's interesting. His concept there is, I didn't come trying to teach you the wisdom of man, or teach you these things through the wisdom of man, because by doing so, the cross of Messiah would be nullified. It's speaking that truth to people that resonates with them, and that they recognize that they're the people to be reached. That, he says, I thought to have nothing among you apart from Messiah, or recognize nothing among you apart apart from Messiah and him crucified. So that's what has the power, not to go and to try and convince people through the wisdom of the world or the wise way that we've thought of to convey it to them. For the word of the cross is indeed foolishness to those who are perishing, but to us who are being saved, it's the power of Elohim. Okay, so if you speak to people about the cross of Messiah, and to most of the world, it's foolishness. That's exactly what you're to expect. But you're not going to try and mitigate that by kind of putting it in a different way or anything like that, or telling them some elements of Elohim. To those who are being saved, it's the power of Elohim, and they will recognize it. For it has been written, I shall destroy the wisdom of the wise and set aside the learning of the learned ones. That comes from the Septuagint. It says, the Lord has said, this people draw nigh to me with their mouth. They honor me with their lips, but their heart is far from me. But in vain do they worship me, teaching the commandments and doctrines of men. And the same is true if you give people like a potted version of Yehovah or an edited version of Yehovah that they can come to believe in. They're worshiping him in vain. Because what they're actually, that their heart is not with Yehovah. They're worshiping him in vain. They're teaching the commandments and the doctrines, the ideas of men, and not Yehovah. Therefore, behold, I will proceed to remove this people, and I will remove them, and I will destroy the wisdom of the wise, and will hide the understanding of the prudent. Woe to them that deepen their counsel, and not by the Lord. Woe to them that take secret counsel, and whose works are in darkness, and they say, who has seen us, and who shall know us, or what we do? And I was discussing this concept with Charlie this week, this idea of people misunderstand this. Okay, woe to them that deepen their counsel, but not by the Lord. If you educate yourself in something, you're deepening your counsel. You're deepening your understanding, the things from which you can take counsel, and not by the Lord. So is this saying that anything that's not from the scriptures, woe to those people who are learning those things? It's not saying that. What's actually saying is, if you deepen your counsel by things that are contrary to what is in the word. I'll give you an example. If you began to learn about biology, okay, you begin to learn about the biology and you become a doctor or whatever, you begin to use your knowledge of biology for something good. That's not contrary to the word of Yehovah. So you've deepened your counsel. Well, that's not wrong. What would be wrong is if you began to learn biology, then you began to learn about the theory of evolution, and that's actually contrary to what the scriptures teach. And so you've deepened your counsel, and it's actually contrary to Yehovah, which makes what is said next extremely interesting. Shall ye not be counted as the clay of the potter? Shall the thing formed say to him that formed it, thou didst not form me? That's what evolutionists do, isn't it? Okay, they've deepened their counsel, and they've thought themselves to be wise and to be getting all of this wisdom of the world, but they've done it not by Yehovah. Or the work to the maker, thou hast not made me wisely, which again tickles me, because that's what evolutionists say, isn't it? They say, well, if we were created by a God, he's not done a very good job because of this or because of that, and they point to things that they don't understand. Where is the wise? Where is the scholar? Where is the debater of this age? Has not Elohim made foolish the wisdom of this world? This is what's contrary to him. Obviously, again, you can educate yourself in stuff that you need to know. For since in the wisdom of Elohim, the world through wisdom did not know Elohim. Okay, that's quite a statement. Through Elohim's wisdom, the way that he wanted it to be, his wisdom said that through the wisdom of the world, they wouldn't know Elohim. So through them thinking these great things of themselves, they actually would be leading themselves away from Elohim, and it was his wisdom for things to be like that. it pleased Elohim through the foolishness of preaching to save those who believe. So it pleases him that when you speak things that would be foolishness to most people, that he will save people through those very things. And it pleases him that people thinking that they've got all of this wisdom and all of this knowledge actually makes it so that they don't know him. Since Jews ask a sign and Greeks seek wisdom, yet we proclaim Messiah crucified. To the Jews a stumbling block and to the Greeks foolishness. And it might not be a sign, it might not be wisdom that people that you speak to are looking for, but the message wasn't tailored for the Jews. Okay, and when people want a sign, as we've seen before, when they see a sign, that doesn't convince them of anything. They either believe what is being said, and then it's accompanied by a sign, or they don't believe it. The Greeks seek wisdom. They want some kind of, intellectual explanation of the way that everything works, and maybe they'd be convinced through that. So when you try to reach people, don't go to them where they're at. Don't go to them with a sign or with wisdom or with whatever it is that you think is going to play to their particular understanding. We proclaim Messiah crucified. To the Jews, it's a stumbling block, and to the Greeks, it's foolishness. But who cares? We still preach that because that's what the truth, and that is the thing that has power to save people. But to those who are called, both Jews and Greeks, Messiah, the power of Elohim and the wisdom of Elohim. Okay, so among those people who are going to respond by signs and by wisdom, okay, among them, those who are called among them, to them, Messiah is the power of Elohim and the wisdom of Elohim. For the foolishness of Elohim is wiser than men, and the weakness of Elohim is stronger than men. For look at your calling, brothers. There are not many wise according to the flesh, not many mighty, not many noble. But Elohim has chosen the foolish matters of the world to put to shame the wise, and Elohim has chosen the weak of the world to put to shame the strong. As we've seen, this is what pleases him to do this. Pleases him that we speak things that are foolishness to most men, yet some are going to recognize the truth of spiritually. And Elohim has chosen the lowborn of the world and the despised and the ones that are not, that he might bring to naught the ones that are, so that no flesh should boast in his presence. And of him you are in Messiah Yeshua, who became for us wisdom from Elohim, righteousness also, set apartness, holiness, and redemption. And we recognize those things. Most people, they're foolishness, but to us they're the very wisdom and power of Elohim. And you'll never explain that to anybody, and trying to explain it to people is only ever going to reach people to whom it's not going to affect anyway. That as it is being written, let him who boasts, let him boast in Yehovah. Let him boast that he knows me, that he knows my name. Hebrews 5:11 to 6:12 says, concerning whom we have much to say. Okay, he's just mentioned Melchizedek. Hard to explain since you've become dull of hearing. Okay, there's much to say about Melchizedek, isn't there? There's the three priesthoods, and there's atonement being made in the realm of the spirit, and in the realm of the flesh, and in the realm of the conscience. And there's all sorts of stuff about Melchizedek that could be taught. And he says it's hard to explain since you've become dull of hearing. For indeed, although by this time you ought to be teachers, you need someone to teach you again the first elements of the words of Elohim, and you have become such as need milk and not solid food. So he's saying by this time you should be teaching other people about Elohim. Not that you're going to become a teacher, okay, that particular gift of the Spirit, but you should be teaching others and sharing with others who Elohim is. You need the first elements of the words of Elohim, and you've become such as need milk and not solid food. For everyone partaking of milk is inexperienced in the word of righteousness, for he is a babe. But solid food is for the mature, whose senses have been trained by practice to discern both good and evil. And I hope that we can all agree that through the practice of righteousness, our senses have been trained to discern good and evil. Therefore, having left the word of the beginning of the Messiah, let us go on to perfection, not laying again the foundation of repentance from dead works and of belief towards Elohim, of the teaching of baptisms and of laying on of hands and of resurrection of the dead and of everlasting judgment. And the reason he goes on to explain this is interesting, but it's funny. For Charlie and I, we're in a position where when we teach people, we're teaching people who have just come. It might be people who've just walked through the door on some occasions, teaching people online. So we have a need to teach the milk, to teach the foundation of repentance so that people understand. But we also have a need to teach the meat, as I'm recognizing here. Okay, we all have had our senses trained by walking in righteousness, and we need the meat. He says, and this we shall do if Elohim indeed permits. For it is impossible for those who were once enlightened and have tasted the heavenly gift and have become partakers of the Holy Spirit, the set-apart Spirit, have tasted the good word of Elohim and the powers of the age to come, and fall away to renew them again to repentance, having crucified for themselves the Son of Elohim again and put him to open shame. So what's this saying? It's saying, for some people, there's no point in teaching them that they need to come to repentance. If they've recognized the truth of the word, if they've come to Yeshua, they know that they're to repent, and they've decided that they're just going to fall away and that they're going to be stubborn towards things, there's no point in teaching them that milk over and over again. He's saying, let's move on to other things. And we've realized that here. We had a group of people come in for a period of time who had things in their lives that they were unwilling to repent of. They were unwilling to let go of. And we spent so long, we spent a year, maybe longer, a year and a half, teaching these foundations to them again. Teaching, listen, you need to come to repentance. This is what it looks like. This is why you've not repented, and putting it in all sorts of different ways and drawing it all out of the scriptures. But it all came to naught because of this exact thing. To those people, there's no point in teaching the milk again and again to. For the ground that is drinking the rain, often falling on it, and is bearing plants fit for those by whom it is tilled, receives a blessing from Elohim. Okay, so what this will go on to say is, hearing these foundations over and again is good. Okay, and it's good for a particular purpose that we'll get onto. But what he's saying is, the ground that's actually drinking the rain that's falling on it and is bearing fruit, in other words, receives blessing from Elohim. But if it brings forth thorns and thistles, it's rejected and near to being cursed and ends up being burned. Okay, those who don't bring fruits worthy of repentance, okay, they're cut down and they're cast into the fire. And with those people, there's no point in trying to tell them that they've not repented or that they need to come to repentance again. But although we speak in this way, beloved, we are persuaded concerning you of better matters which possess deliverance or salvation. For Elohim is not unrighteous to forget your work and labor of love which you have shown towards his name, in that you've attended to the set-apart ones and still attend. And we desire that each one of you show the same eagerness to the entire confirmation of expectation until the end, in order that you do not become sluggish, but imitate those who through belief and patience inherit the promises. Okay, so what Paul is saying, and what we'll see in a second that Peter is saying, is that it's good to hear these things. Okay, we, as I'm saying, Charlie and I are in a position where we have to teach the milk and we have to teach the meat and find the right balance between the two. But it's good for people to hear those things over and over because it has this effect. Okay, we're to admonish one another so that people do not become sluggish. So that, you know, we've talked about the weak arms that hang down and the weak knees or whatever it is in Hebrews 12. okay, that we're to be strengthened in these things. But imitate those who through belief and patience inherit the promises. Peter puts it differently. He says, for this reason, brothers, all the more do your utmost to make firm your calling and choosing. For if you're doing these matters, you shall never stumble at all. And of course, what he's talking about is having self-control and endurance and all those things that we've been through before. If you're doing those, you shall never stumble at all. For in this way, an entrance into the everlasting kingdom of our Master and Savior, Yeshua Messiah, shall be richly supplied to you. And so I intend to remind you of these matters again and again, though you know them and have been established in the present truth. But I think it's right, as long as I'm in this tent, to stir you up by a reminder, knowing that the putting off of my tent is soon, even as our Master Yeshua Messiah has made clear to me. And I shall do my utmost also to see to it that you always have a reminder of these masters after my departure. Because what do they serve to do? They serve to strengthen people. Verse 16 says, for we did not follow cleverly devised stories when we made known to you the power and coming of our Master Yeshua Messiah. Okay, again, we didn't come to you with some kind of crafted message to tell you about Elohim in the way that we thought would be best to tell you about Elohim. And the same must be true for all of us. Okay, when we tell people, we don't craft messages to deliver a part of Elohim that we think people will like. But we were eyewitnesses of his magnificence. And obviously, literally, they were eyewitnesses. They saw what he did. But we are also witnesses of his magnificence in what he has done in our lives. And that's where living these things out and being a light to people comes in. Exodus 3:14-16 tells us how Elohim wants us to speak of him. It shall be when your son asks you in time to come, saying, what is this? Then you shall say to him, by strength of hand, Yehovah brought us out of Mitzrayim, out of the house of bondage. And it came to be when Pharaoh was too hardened to let us go, that Yehovah killed every firstborn in the land of Mitzrayim, both the firstborn of man and the firstborn of beast. Therefore, I'm sacrificing to Yehovah every male that opens the womb, but every firstborn of my sons I ransom. So, he says, when you tell your children about these things, tell them that Yehovah killed all of the firstborn of man, all the firstborn of the animals. Therefore, I'm going to offer to him the firstborn of my animals, and when it comes to my firstborn child, I'm going to ransom them. I'm going to give Yehovah money for my child. To most people, this is going to sound like foolishness. But that's what I'm talking about when I say that these elements are emphasized in there, that we even tell people the bits of Yehovah that seem like foolishness to them. You know, what you're offering the firstborn of your animals that you're born to God. You're giving God some money. Does God need money? I don't think that God needs any money, does he? These things that are going to sound stupid, but they're an integral element of what he's telling us to pass on. It shall be a sign on your hand and as frontlets between your eyes. By strength of hand, Yehovah brought us out of Mitzrayim. Again, these things are about the works that he's done. Speak of when he brought the Israelites out of Egypt. And this is what he's saying for us to tell to our children. Psalm 78, 1-17 says, my people, give ear to my Torah, incline your ears to the words of my mouth. I open my mouth in a parable, I utter stories of old, which we have heard and known, for our fathers related them to us. This is a very important part. We do not hide them from their children, relating them to the generation to come. The praises, the tehillah of Yehovah and his strength and his wonders which he's done. So when you're telling your children about who Yehovah is, do not edit who he is. Don't think, oh, it might not be suitable for me to tell my children that he killed all of the children. This is what we're told to convey, and it's exactly the same when we're talking to people of the world. For he raised a witness in Yaakov and set a Torah in Yisrael, which he commanded our fathers to teach them to their children, that it might be known to a generation to come, to children who will be born, to rise up and relate them to their children. Place their trust in Elohim. Okay, some people are going to respond to these words. They're going to spiritually discern them. For them to place their trust in Elohim and not forget the works of El, but to watch over his commands. These things have this effect on people. Not be like their fathers, a stubborn and rebellious generation, a generation which did not prepare its heart, whose spirit was not steadfast to El. So part of what he wants people to be reminded of, particularly our children in this context, is that their fathers were rebellious and that Yehovah punished them, and that he did what, subjectively we're going to think are almost cruel things to them, things that sound very, very harsh. But that is a part of who he is. That's a part of exalting who he is to other people. And who are we to take those things away? And as we've seen, if we do take them away, they lose their power. The children of Ephraim, armed bowmen, turned back in the day of battle. They did not cherish the covenant of Elohim, and they refused to walk in his Torah. So this is an important part of what we're to teach our children. They forgot his deeds and his wonders which he had shown them. He did wonders in the sight of their fathers, in the land of Mitzrayim, in the field of Zoan. He split the sea and caused them to pass through. He made the waters stand up like a heap, and led them with the cloud by day and with the night, and all the night with the light of fire. He split the rocks in the wilderness and made them drink as from the great depths, and brought forth streams from the rock, caused water to come down as rivers. Yet they sinned still more against him, to rebel against the Most High in the desert. This is the power of these narratives that we're to tell our children, so that they can understand these things. It's quite important for us to understand it. When we go through these things, we can see these things in the people. It's important for them too. Psalm 44 says, "O Elohim, we have heard with our ears. Our fathers have related to us the work you did in their days, in the days of old. You drove out the nations with your hand, but them you planted. You afflicted peoples and sent them out." Again, there's no censorship of Elohim here. "For not by their own sword did they possess the land, neither did their arm save them, but it was your right hand and your arm and the light of your presence, because you delighted in them." Speaking of his provision is important, as we'll see. "You yourself are my king, O Elohim. Command deliverances for Yaakov. Through you we push our enemies. Through your name we tread down those who rise up against us." The destruction of our enemies is a constant theme. "For I do not trust in my bow, and my sword does not save me. But you have saved us from our enemies, and have put shame to those who hated us. In Elohim we shall boast all day long, and praise your name forever. Selah. Yet you've rejected us and put us to shame, and you do not go with our armies." Okay, so this is an important part of what we are to tell our children too. Why we are scattered amongst the world. What it was that brought that about. "You make us turn back from the adversary, and those who hate us have plundered us. You do give us as sheep to be eaten, and you've scattered us among the Gentiles. You sell your people for no value and have set no high price on them. You make us a reproach to our neighbors, a scorn and a mockery to those round about us." These people, okay, this relating of it, they've misunderstood something. They've misunderstood who Elohim is. We've been scattered among people, but then they start to blame Elohim. "You make us a proverb among the nations, a shaking of the head among the peoples. My reproach is always before me, and the shame of my face has covered me, because of the voice of the slanderer and the blasphemer, because of the enemy and the avenger. All this has come upon us, but we have not forgotten you, neither have we been false to your covenant. Our heart has not turned back, neither has our step swerved from your way." So this is what they were charging Elohim with. They were saying, you've done all of this stuff, but we've done nothing. We haven't departed from your way. And these things sound like nice little sound bites. We've not forgotten you, neither have we been false to your covenant. But this was something that was said in wickedness. When we relate these things to our children, we tell them of the people who did these things. We tell them of the stubbornness. We tell them of the great victories that Elohim has wrought when he brought his people out of Egypt. And all of these things are incredibly important. If they're important to us as we learn the Torah, they're important to our children. Exodus 12:25-27 says, and it shall be when you come to the land which Jehovah gives you, as he promised, that you shall cherish this service. Okay, this is the Passover. And it shall be when your children say to you, what does this service mean to you? Then you shall say, it's the Passover sacrifice of Yehovah, who passed over the houses of the children of Yisrael in Mitzrayim, when he smote the Egyptians and delivered our households. So when your children come and they say, what's Passover about? Don't try and come up with your own version of it to tell them. Okay, you tell them, it's the Passover of Yehovah. Okay, and it's because he passed over the houses of the people of Israel when he killed all of the Egyptians. And think, maybe that's not suitable for me to be telling my child. Okay, this is what we're commanded to do, and these things have importance and significance. Leviticus 23:41-43 says, and you shall observe it as a festival to Yehovah for 7 days in the year, a law forever in your generations. Observe it in the 7th Chodesh. Dwell in tabernacles for 7 days. All who are native Yisraelites dwell in tabernacles, so that your generations know that I made the children of Yisrael dwell in tabernacles when I brought them out of the land of Mitzrayim. This is one of the importances of keeping the feasts. This is one of the things that's expressed. It's this narrative which is to be kept going, relating the works of Elohim, so that we know. Okay, when our children come to us and they ask, we say to them, it's because of this, it's because of that, and we're truthful and we tell them all of the story. And we do the same with the people of the world as well, because that's what has power, not our version of Yehovah. Revelation 21:1-5 says, and I saw a new heaven and a new earth, for the former heaven and the former earth have passed away. The sea is no more. And I, Yochanan, saw the set-apart city, New Jerusalem, coming down out of the heaven from Elohim, prepared as a bride adorned for her husband. And I heard a loud voice from heaven saying, see, the tabernacle of Elohim is with man, and he shall dwell with them, and they shall be his people, and Elohim himself shall be with them and be their Elohim. And Elohim shall wipe away every tear from their eyes, and there shall be no more death, nor mourning, nor crying, and there shall be no more pain, for former matters have passed away. And he who was sitting on the throne said, see, I make all matters new. And he said to me, write, for these words are true and trustworthy. Okay, so you might think when you're relating to somebody about Elohim, okay, I'm not going to tell them that Elohim's going to wipe every tear from their eyes, and there's going to be no more pain and no more misery and no more this and that. I'm not going to tell them that, because they're just going to think I'm a fool. They're going to think I'm a fool for believing this. But these words are true and trustworthy, and because they're going to resonate with some people in a way that we can't explain. You don't know what someone's going through in their life. You don't know how something like that is going to reach them and have meaning to them, and how they're going to see the truth of it. So we can't edit that and change it to be something else. Psalm 145 says, I exalt you, I lift you up, my Elohim, O King, and bless your name forever and ever. All day long I bless you and praise your name forever and ever. Great is Yehovah, greatly to be praised, and his greatness is unsearchable. Generation after generation commend your works. They declare your mighty acts. I declare the esteemed splendor of your excellence and the matters of your wondrous works. And they speak of the might of your awesome acts, and I recount your greatness. They send forth the remembrance of your great goodness, and they renan of your righteousness. Yahovah shows favor and is compassionate, patient, and great in kindness. Yahovah is good to all, and he has compassion on all his works. All your works give thanks to you, O Yahovah, and your kind ones bless you. They speak of the esteem of your kingdom and talk of your might, to make known to the sons of men his acts and the esteemed splendor of his kingdom. Your kingdom is an everlasting kingdom, and your rule is throughout all generations. Yahovah is supporting all who are falling and raising up all who are bowed down. The eyes of all look to you expectantly. You are giving them their food in its season, opening your hand and satisfying the desire of all that live. Yahovah is righteous in all his ways and kind in all his works. Yahovah is near to all who call upon him, to all who call upon him in truth. He does the desire of those who fear him. He hears their cry and he saves them. Yahovah preserves all those loving him, but all the wrong ones he destroys. My mouth speaks the tehillah of Yahovah, and let all flesh bless his set-apart name. So if you're ever wondering, what are the elements of exalting Yahovah again? Psalm 145 is a good one to read. And don't be ashamed of his words. Those things are true. And when you're telling people of them, those words are trustworthy and true. And woe to them if they're foolishness to them. Now, we've been talking for quite a while now. I would say that there's probably about 15 slides until we come to an end. I'm not going to talk about Exodus 16 and the manna coming down. I know that Charlie's going to address the Sabbath next week, or I think that he might. He's considering it. So there's about 15 slides. So everyone just take a moment and refresh yourselves. I'm not going to take a break now and, have a break for 10 minutes and then come back and do a little bit. Okay, so I'll just continue to the end. It's not much. They came to Elim, where there were 12 fountains of water and 70 palm trees, and they camped there by the waters. Okay, so what's interesting to me in this, when I'm thinking about exalting Yahovah, is they came to this place of great abundance. They came to like a little paradise. Okay, they just cross the Red Sea, and then they come to this place, which is like a paradise. What's interesting to me is that Yahovah doesn't tell them to make a remembrance of this. What he's going to tell them to make a remembrance of is the fact that he provided the manna for them. That doesn't mean that these sort of things are not important, but I think people have an overemphasis when they're telling people about who Yahovah is. They try to kind of overemphasize these times when Yahovah's done something amazing for them, and that is certainly good to recount, and that's certainly a good witness of who Yahovah is. But I think we try to kind of edit who he is, and we come and we try to tell people about who he is, but we focus on very narrow bands of his character that we think are going to be appealing to them. Ecclesiastes 5:18-20 says, "See what I have seen, it is good and pleasant for one to eat and drink, and to enjoy the good of all his labor, in which he toils under the sun, all the days of his life, which Elohim gives him, for it's his portion." So it's good for people to rejoice in these things. It's good for people to enjoy them. Further, when Elohim has given any man riches and wealth and permitted him to enjoy them and to receive his portion and rejoice in his labor, this is a gift from Elohim, and this is good. Though it not be much, let him remember the days of his life, because Elohim bears witness by the gladness of his heart. So these things do have importance, and Elohim is bearing witness by the gladness and the things that we appreciate about what he does for us. But the thing that he tells them to remember is this. Okay, so the manna comes down, and we have them being taught about the Sabbath. Then it says the house of Yisrael called its name manna. and it was like white coriander seed, and the taste of it was like thin cakes made with honey. And Moshe said, this is the word which Yehovah has commanded. Fill an omer with it to keep for your generations, so that they see the bread with which I fed you in the wilderness when I brought you out of the land of Mitzrayim. And Moshe said to Aharon, take a pot and put an omer of manna in it, and set it down before Yehovah to keep for your generations. As Yehovah commanded Moshe, so Aharon did. So did Aharon set it down before the witness, the ark of the witness, to keep it. So we can see through these things, the things that are really important to Yehovah for us to remember, and what's really important for these things to stand as a witness to the children of Israel. And one of those things we've been reading about in the Psalms is his provision for people. Not necessarily those moments of everything being wonderful like it was in Elim, or those have the importance of their own, but these matters of him providing for his people. Psalm 66 says, shout with joy to Elohim, ruah to Elohim, all the earth. Sing out the splendor of his name, pluck out the splendor of his name. Make his tehillah esteemed. Say to Elohim, how awesome are your works. Through the greatness of your power, your enemies feign obedience to you. Again, the same thought, the same Hebrew words as those who hate you feign obedience to you, which we see in people. All the earth bow to you. They sing praises. They pluck their instruments to you. They praise your name, Selah, they Salo or Zamar to your name. Come and see the works of Elohim, awesome acts towards the sons of men. He has turned the sea into dry land. They went through the river on foot. There we rejoiced, we samacht in him. Who rules by his power forever, his eyes keeping watch on the Gentiles. Let the rebellious not exalt themselves, let them not lift up what is false. Bless our Elohim, you peoples, and make the voice of his tehillah abroad. Make the voice of his hymns abroad. Who keeps our souls and does not allow our feet to be moved. For you, O Elohim, have proved us. You've refined us as silver is refined. You brought us into the net. You laid affliction on our loins. Again, these things are important when we're relating to others. All of who Elohim is. When we are exalting him, we exalt him in everything. You have let men ride at our head. We went through fire and through water, but you have brought us out to plenty. I enter your house with burnt offerings. I complete my vows to you. Again, those things which perhaps seem strange in exalting him. That which my lips have uttered and my mouth spoke in my distress. Burnt offerings of fatlings I offer to you. With the incense of rams I offer bulls with goats. Selah. Come here, all you who fear Elohim, and I relate what he has done for my soul. So again we see, I called to him with my mouth, and lifting him up was in my tongue. Translated as praise here, it's the verb to lift him up. That was in my tongue. I was lifting him up with the things I said. If I have seen wickedness in my heart, Yehovah would not hear. Truly Elohim has heard me. He has given heed to the voice of my prayer. Blessed be Elohim, who has not turned away my prayer, nor his kindness from me. So we see when Elohim is praised in the Psalms, when he's spoken of, when he's exalted in the Psalms, it's all of those characteristics of him. And we might think to edit those things out. Verse 35 says, the children of Israel ate manna for 40 years until they came to an inhabited land. They ate manna until they came to the border of the land of Canaan. And an omer is 1/10 of an ephah. And all the congregation of the children of Israel set out on their journey from the wilderness of Sin, according to the command of Yehovah, and camped in Rephidim. And again, there was no water for the people to drink. Therefore the people strove with Moshe and said, give us water to drink. And Moshe said, why do you strive with me? Why do you try Yehovah? The people thirsted there for water. The people grumbled against Moshe and said, why did you bring us out of Mitzrayim to kill us and our children and our livestock with thirst? Then Moshe cried out to Yehovah, saying, what am I to do with this people? Yet a little, and they stone me. And Yehovah said to Moshe, pass over before the people, take with you some of the elders of Israel. Take in your hand your rod with which you smote the river, and go, the rod which Elohim gave to him. See, I am standing before you there on the rock in Horeb, and you shall smite the rock, and water shall come out of it, and the people shall drink. And Moshe did so before the eyes of the elders of Israel. And he called the name of that place Massah and Meribah, because of the strife of the children of Israel, and because they tried Yehovah, saying, is Yehovah in our midst or not? Okay, so just like we did when we were camping at Sukkot, standing in the face of the storm and saying, well, if Yehovah's with us, then he's going to make the storm go away. And Amalek came and fought with Yisrael in Rephidim. And Moshe said to Yehoshua, choose for us men and go out, fight with Amalek. Tomorrow I'm stationing myself on the top of the hill with the rod of Elohim in my hand. And Yehoshua did as Moshe said to him, to fight with Amalek. And Moshe, Aharon, and Hur went up to the top of the hill. And it came to be when Moshe held up his hand, when he lifted up his hand. We've seen before that when we do the works of Moshe, the Torah, okay, Yisrael has victory. But here we can see it with a little bit more detail from when we looked at Terum. When he lifted up, when the hands of Moshe, the works of Torah, were lifted up, when they were exalted, Israel prevailed. And when he let down his hand, Amalek prevailed. But Moshe's hands were heavy, so they took a stone and put it under him, and he sat on it, and Aharon and Hur supported his hands. I can do all things through Messiah who strengthens me. One on one side and one on the other, and his hands were steady until the going down of the sun. And Yehoshua defeated Amalek and his people with the edge of the sword. And Yehovah said to Moshe, write in this book, recite it in the hearing of Yehoshua again, relating who he is to people. He says, I want you to note this down. I want you to recite it to Joshua, that I shall completely blot out the remembrance of Amalek from under the heavens. That's his character. Moshe built an altar and called its name Yehovah Nisi. For he said, because hand of Yehovah is on the throne of Yehovah, Yehovah is to fight against Amalek from generation to generation. In the Septuagint, we get a little bit of a different flavor of that. It says, Moshe built an altar to Yehovah, called the name of it, the Lord my refuge, Yehovah Nisi. That's what it would be translated as. For with a secret hand, the Lord wages war upon Amalek to all generations. And here we're brought back full circle to Yehovah and his attitude and his works towards our enemies. I'll finish with this. Isaiah 25, 1-9 says, O Yehovah, you are my Elohim. I lift you up. I praise your name, for you shall do a wonder, counsels of long ago, trustworthiness, truth. For you make a city a heap, a walled city a ruin, a palace of foreigners to be a city no more, never to be rebuilt. Therefore, a strong people give you weight. The city of the ruthless nations has feared you. For you shall be a refuge to the poor, a refuge to the needy in his distress, a shelter from the storm, a shade from the heat. For the spirit of the ruthless is like a storm against the wall. You subdue the noise of foreigners as heat in a dry place, as heat in the shadow of a cloud. The singing of the ruthless is subdued. And in this mountain Yehovah Sabaoth shall make a name, for all the people a feast of choice pieces, a feast of old wines, a choice of choice pieces with marrow of old wines well refined. And he shall swallow up on this mountain the surface of the covering that covers all people, the veil which is spread over all nations. So what is this veil and this covering that he's going to swallow up? He shall swallow up death forever, and the Master Yehovah shall wipe away tears from all faces and take away the reproach of his people from all the earth. For Yehovah has spoken. And it shall be said in that day, see, this is our Elohim. We have waited for him, and he saves us. This is Yehovah. We've waited for him. Let us be glad and samach in his deliverance, in his salvation, in his Yeshua. So don't be afraid, don't be ashamed of the words of Yehovah. Speak them boldly. Exalt Yehovah when you speak to people. Don't diminish him. Shall we pray? Father, help us to exalt you. Help us to appreciate your magnificence. We thank you for those moments of joy which we feel in our hearts when we're overcome with emotion for you and for the things that you do and for who you are. Thank you for your name. Thank you that you are worthy to be imitated by us. Thank you for your great mercy, and thank you for your compassion. I pray, Father, for people who are watching this who are coming to know you. I pray that you would you'd lift them up through your word, that you would open their eyes so that they could see the wondrous things in your Torah. I thank you that you did that for me and that you've done that for the people here. I ask you, Father, that you would use us to speak of your name to others, to exalt you, to lift you up and to give you weight. Thank you, Father. Amen.